afternoon. This is a hearing of the Chatham Conservation Commission being held on March 13th, 2024, in accordance with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Town of Chatham Wetlands Protection Bylaw and Regulations. My name is Janet Williams, and I serve as the chair. Today's hearing is being broadcast live on Channel 8 and is being recorded for the on-demand archives available on the town's website. It's being conducted in person, by phone, and by video conference. The agenda, instructions on how to attend, and copies of documents for review are all posted on the town's website. So to all participants, whether you're attending by phone or online, please remain muted unless you've been recognized by the chair. If you're attending by phone, you can mute and unmute by using *6. And if you're online and you're not a commissioner, we ask that you please keep your camera turned off until you've been recognized. You can indicate that you wish to speak or ask a question by using the raise hand feature. When you are recognized, please remember to identify yourself for the record. So that we have a record of a quorum attending today, I'll now ask each commissioner to indicate their presence. Vice Chair Karen Latin.
Present.
Bob Rawls.
Present.
Bob Delvecchio remains on leave. Mary Sullivan.
Present.
Elise Gordon.
Present.
Cheryl Meservey.
Present.
Eric Hilbert.
Present.
And I am here, so we have established that we have a quorum. Before we begin the agenda, I'll ask Paul Whiteman, the conservation agent, if there are any announcements or requests for continuances for today.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. There are two requests. The first one is 55 Linnell Lane. That'll be continued to April 3rd, 2024. The second is 21 Shattuck Lane. That will be continued to March 27th, 2024.
March 27th. Okay, and so with that, I'll ask Paul to begin to walk us through the agenda for today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First on the agenda is a requested order of conditions. The project location is Cockle Cove, applicant Forrest Schneck, I guess. Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries is the applicant. DEP number SE103672. The project is proposed as an eelgrass transplant and habitat restoration.
All right, thank you, Paul. Is Mr. Schenk here today with us? Nope. Or online? Is that him online? 203?
Do we?
Nope. Oh, I thought the 203 number might have been. It's okay. Just wanted to ask if he had any comments. We did post this on the website. We've had it available for commission members to review and make any suggested changes or edits. The version we have now is the approved final version. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this order of conditions? Restoration order of conditions, a little different from most of ours because it is a ecological restoration project, one that we're pretty excited about. Want to see how it goes and hope very much that it's a success. All right, I guess we're ready for...
It's perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. So,
All right. I move that we close Cockle Cove and approve the order of conditions.
Gordon, second.
roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That's unanimous. That has been approved and will be issued. All right, Paul, what's next?
Next on the agenda, Madam Chair, is a request for an extension of an order of conditions. The location of the project is 139 Pine Knoll Avenue. The applicant's John Janelle, map 5C, parcel S59, DEP number SE103409. The project is proposed as a new foundation under an existing single-family home, replacement of an existing deck, steps, and proposed related grading and landscaping. The extension request for the replacement of the deck is being delayed because of rising material costs. All other provisions of the project are complete, and the order expires 5/21/2024.
All right, thank you, Paul.
Yes.
Is there somebody representing the project here?
Yes, Dan Croto from Moran Engineering. We drew the original site plan John was not able to make it, unfortunately. So the owner is requesting an extension of the order. The house foundation work is complete. Roof, stormwater, drains, gutters, downspouts, dry wells is complete. The yard and the planting is stable, and that's complete. And he would still like to do the deck rebuild project under the current order if feasible. So he was looking for an extension so he could take on that project in the next year or so.
Okay,
The deck's safe. It's just getting towards the end of its lifespan. We'd like to tackle that project.
okay. So this would be the second extension. There was one granted a year or so
Correct.
ago. So this will take it to 5/21/2025. What's the status of the mitigation?
I believe it's planted. I believe it's in the second year of growing.
Okay, so another year would help with that, too. We'd be able to see how the
Correct.
full 3 years looks, okay. We hear from the building department that it says there's an open building permit for the foundation under the dwelling. A final building inspection is required. To date, no application for the deck and the steps has been applied for. So it sounds like you need to
Right.
make an application with the building department.
Yeah, he's aware of that.
Okay.
He'll need to, for the deck project, with conservation approval, he'll need to get his building permit for that, for the deck.
Okay, so you're all aware of that. Any questions or comments on this request?
I have my notes, he's asking for are you asking for 2 years or 1 year extension?
You'll need-
One.
Ideally, the owner's asking for 2 if it's doable. It looks like there can be a total of 3, but it's.
Yeah, you can do 3 one-year extensions under the bylaw, under our regulations, so each one is 1 year.
It's asking for 2
Okay.
years here.
We're going to do it for a 1-year extension to May 21st, 2025.
Sounds good. We'll take however it works.
That's what we can do. All right,
Okay. I move that we approve a 1-year extension for 139 Pine Knoll Avenue to 5/21/2025.
Gordon, second.
roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
And I vote aye. You have another year. We'll see you back here either for another extension, hopefully not, or a certificate of compliance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
All right, Paul, what's next?
Next is a second request for a extension on an order of conditions. The location is 80 Main Street, Double K Ranch, map 17B, parcel 54, DEP number SE10 3380. The proposed project is to lift the house and rotate a new foundation and a new septic system. The extension is to replant and reestablish the mitigation plants and erosion control grasses and forbs within the mitigation restoration area that did not survive during the drought and several storm events. This order expires on 3/26/24.
Okay, is anybody here for this project? I'll note that the request was made by Crawford Land Management, who is the contractor working on the mitigation and restoration.
I think,
Hello. You are here.
Hi, my name is Angela Tanner. I'm here from Crawford Land Management. And yes, we submitted the extension just to be able to reestablish the mitigation plantings. I believe everything else on the project has been completed.
Okay, so some of the mitigation plans have not, didn't make it through some of the more challenging
Correct.
climate-related events that
Correct.
we've experienced. So, all right, this expires, like 2 weeks. So this would extend it to March 26th, 2025. And that's the second, and we're going to probably put on our calendars that there will likely be a third, because a lot of these plants will only have one growing season under their belts. So we'll probably want to wait and see make sure they get through subsequent season. Okay.
Okay.
Questions or comments?
I do.
Go ahead.
Angela, I just want to show the picture that I took when I was there. I'm just wondering whether or not, do you need to have a change in the type of plants being planted?
There are no plants there now.
Oh, I thought,
It is,
okay, go
I
ahead.
mean, there were very few. What they had done, when was this picture taken?
Yesterday.
Yesterday, okay. So they had gone in and kind of re-cleaned the area up, and then they used a soil stabilization hydro seed in the fall to reestablish kind of the ground covers. But most of the shrub material, grasses, I don't know exactly which factors killed each of the species. I understand there were some irrigation issues at one point. So I don't think that the species necessarily need to be reevaluated, but I wouldn't be opposed to it either.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because this looks pretty bare. If that was, if there were plants,
It is. The shrub material is basically non-existent.
it's just, it looks like a moonscape.
Yeah, but it was a good mix. It wasn't like we planted all one species. There was a variety in there. So my suspicion is that it had more to do with the conditions than the individual plants. However, if you have, specific requests,
Oh,
I'm
no.
sure we can.
I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but I'm just wondering out loud whether or not anything's going to survive there if it looks like this after having been planted already.
Well, I hope something will survive.
And if that's the case,
We have
maybe
sweet-
it's something
sweet
different.
Fern.
Looks terrible.
Yeah, we have sweet fern, bayberry, beach plum, Virginia rose, and then we had a good mix of grasses and perennials as well. So I think probably what happened were the conditions more than the species.
The conditions that won't be changing.
Well, the
Irrigation.
irrigation hopefully
Yeah.
will be better.
Did you
better
say there was a
set up and
failure of the
monitored.
irrigation system somehow, that it did not? Is that?
I think there, at some point during the construction process, things were messed up and weren't hitting the plants on a regular basis or on a full coverage. So that's something that definitely needs to be monitored this go around.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess you should be aware that you might run out of extensions unless
Well,
you get the right stuff there. Anyway, I'm going to stop sharing.
no, thank you for that, Bob.
Yeah, we
So-
can certainly, if we have some ideas for some alternative plant species, can we just submit those administratively?
Yes, to
How would you
Paul.
want to deal with
Yes,
that?
and he'll
Okay.
bring it to us.
Okay.
Are you planning on planting this spring season? Is this when this is going to start?
I don't believe we have a contract for this yet, so it would ideally be this year.
Okay, we may grant the extension, and with the condition that we revisit this, and we may add some kind of a longer-term survivability provision so that we don't run out of time in a year and a half or 2 years to check this, to make sure that what you're saying is that it was a site condition that can be changed as opposed to
I hope so.
site condition that can't.
That's what I believe.
Okay, well, we'll do that and ask you to work closely with Paul as this goes forward and keep him informed of when the planting happens so that we know and we can go and take a look and make sure that at least everything appears to be working until it doesn't, unless it doesn't.
I have a
Gotcha.
quick question. if
Go
you
ahead,
don't
Eric.
mind.
Yep.
You ever consider using a jute netting or something to stabilize the banking before you plant? It looks like also
Yeah, I
water
think-
might be coming off the structure of the house. Is there gutters that are discharging on
Yep.
the banking?
I don't believe they're discharging on the bank. There was some mesh applied at one point, I think by others before we got in there. But the recent work that we did was with a soil stabilization hydro seed. So that looks like it's actually taking. So we wouldn't want to put something on top of that unless that completely disappears.
All right, well, we'll be following this one as it goes forward, and hope for the best for success. So for the moment,
Yes.
we'll grant the one-year extension to March 2025.
Madam Chair, can I make a suggestion?
Yes, Paul, please.
Yeah, Angela, if you would arrange a pre-construction meeting with me once your contract is signed, we can go over the erosion issue, the temporary irrigation, and the planting scheme, so that you know we're informed and the commission's informed and we're on top of everything.
Yes, we will do
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, I think we're ready for a motion then.
I move that we approve a one-year extension for 80 Main Street to March 26, 2025, with a meeting before construction with Paul.
Gordon second.
Roll call vote, Bob?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That's been approved for 1 year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Paul, what is next?
Next on the agenda, Madam Chair, is a request for determination of applicability. The applicant address is 20 and 33 Pine Bluff Road, J.R. Fennell Realty Trust of Harwich, map 2A, parcel 67-41 and 66-36, R25-4. The project is a proposed building removal.
Good afternoon. For the record, Sean Riley with Ty and Bond. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yep. Go ahead, Sean.
Hopefully, before you with a simple request to remove an existing structure out of the 100-foot buffer from a top of coastal bank. The top of coastal bank is shown in green. The 50 is shown in red, and the 100-foot buffer is shown in blue. Essentially, the new project is going to relocate the two structures, combine them into one, further away from the resource area. And in doing so, they're going to remove the two structures and the pavement. The existing is on the left, the proposed is on the right. And pull everything out and replace what is removed where the structures are now with lawn area. They're adding in some drainage outside of the buffer, but essentially the work within the buffer zone is to remove the building. With that, I'll open up any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. Quick question. So what is the size of the portion of the cottage that's going to be removed that's in our jurisdiction, just for reference? Do you
It
know?
is, give me 1 second.
I'm looking, I don't see it.
It is about 90 square feet.
Okay. And it's showing the proposed, says existing cottage to be removed, but it's still there. So the question
Yeah.
is, what's going to be in that area once the cottage is removed?
Yeah, so once the cottages, the two cottages are removed, the patios and the concrete apron and parking areas are removed, this will all just become lawn area outside of the buffer. And within the buffer in that 90 square feet.
And that'll be fescue lawn, the kind that we generally approve?
Yes, within the buffer, correct.
Okay. Okay. And you're going to zoning board on April the 4th?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, there's, okay. All right, questions? I'll put it aside first. Questions, comments?
I'll ask.
Go ahead.
Does it all have to be lawn?
It would be very odd not to have it lawn where it's continuous lawn now, all the way up along essentially the perimeter here. It would just be odd to have it something other than lawn.
Okay.
They really don't have any landscape features proposed on that side of the area, and it's really the only open area that they have, so.
Okay.
Okay, anybody over here? Questions, comments? Seems pretty straightforward. Happy to see a structure leave, and even though we'd prefer something native to lawn, the lawn is better than the structure, so it's a net benefit to the environment. Buffer zone -2? That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Paul, what negative is this?
Buffer zone would be 3.
3.
Three.
Oops, negative
Oops.
3. All right,
Okay, I was wrong. All right.
someday we'll get that right.
I move that we approve the request for determination of applicability for 20 and 33 Pine Bluff Road with a -3 determination.
Gordon, second.
Roll call vote, Bob?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
And I vote aye, too. So that's negative determination. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
You too. All right, Paul, moving on. Yeah, we're a little ahead of schedule, 10 minutes. Paul?
Paul, do we lose
Oh,
you?
did we disconnect from you? It's okay, I can read it if he's got an audio.
Hello, I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
That phone call, yeah, the phone call triggered an interruption in the connection, sorry.
Oh, okay, that's
So we're on
okay.
the airport now?
Yep,
Yes.
Okay. The applicant filed a notice of intent. The address is 240 and 438 George Ryder Road and 652 Main Street. Chatham Municipal Airport is the applicant. Maps 9F, 240, 10G, 438, 8E, 1652 Main, parcels 0-2, 240, 1BK1, 438, 53-22, 1652 Main. DEP number is SE10 3658. The proposed project includes vegetation management required to remove obstructions within navigable airspace in compliance with the Federal Aviation and Administration FAA regulations. Vegetation management and removal methodologies impacts to resource areas and buffer zones, inland banks, buffer zones, vegetated wetland, performance standards and resource areas, and variance requests.
thank you,
That is the.
thank you. Hello.
Hello, for the record, I'm Adrienne Dunk from GZA. And
Marco Tariano with Gale Associates.
Okay.
All right, so, hi, everybody, again.
Hello, here we are again.
So I just wanted to start off by saying again that this project has nothing to do with the master plan. If any project on the master plan needs approval by any commission, the airport will come before that commission and seek their approval. This is only for maintenance work that is being done this year. Let me get that out of the way again. The airspace surface was incorrectly identified last time during a presentation by one of the public. The Part 77 surface is 500 feet wide, starts at 200 feet beyond the end of the runway, extends 1,500 feet, and then widens to 25, and then to 5,000 feet over the length of that trapezoid. After consultation with the FAA, it was determined that we would be using a different surface that falls under that Part 77 umbrella called the Type 4 OCS, which is actually a smaller surface. The trapezoid is smaller. It's 200 feet wide from the end of the runway, just like the Part 77 surface is. But it's 400 feet wide, and it extends out to 3,400 feet at the end. Okay. Another thing that was brought up was the displaced thresholds. During the master planning process, that alternative was presented to the FAA. The thresholds would be displaced several hundred feet at either end. It was determined by the FAA that this wasn't a feasible option. The only feasible option would be to remove these obstructions. And lastly, there was a comment in the paper about how the FAA wouldn't require the town to pay the money back. That's not true. I have correspondence from the FAA that if the town can't comply with the grant insurances, it's a compliance issue, and depending on the violation, the town could, it could result in paying the repayment, it could result in the repayment of grants and the withholding and revoking of future funding. So if the airport doesn't comply with these 39 grant assurances, they will and could be required to pay the money back. So that is absolutely on the table. Just want to sort of get that out there right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. So just to finish off from Mark, we're just going to finish responding to comments we received at the last meeting, and then as requested, clarify the project timing, and then have our discussion around the mitigation. I know you also have topics to cover, so let me know.
But those
if-
are included in there, so I can rearrange the order of things here, that's fine.
Okay, great. So just to finish off our response to comments, it was also suggested that the project needed to be reviewed under a subsection of the WPA 310 CMR 10.24. That has to do with coastal resources. So as we went through in detail last week, the project is reviewable under 310 CMR 10.531 for work in the buffer zone to inland resources. A commenter also did seek clarification on if shrubs were going to be left in place, particularly in areas where the maximum allowable height is about 10 feet. Those shrubs will be left in place. So even if they grow to 12 feet, because of their growth pattern, that they're shrubs with diffuse growth, they would be left in place. And that also there's no direct soil disturbance or root removal. We are not proposing grubbing. So I just did want to clarify because a member of the public asked those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Great, so the project timing, I am making the assumption here of like April 2024, just to help with myself understanding elapsed time where it's not lined up with the calendar year. I understand that issuance is at your discretion. But so we would be proposing this upcoming winter in 2024 to 2025 to do the proposed approach surface clearing and implement the VMP on the parcels that are before the commission now. That next year, we would have our adaptive management and invasive species management in the spring or summer of 2025, as well as in 2026. Then in early 2027, we are proposing to complete the transitional surface clearing that's on the parcels before the commission now. And then, because the VMP requires 5 years of YOPs, we've got of yearly operational plans, we've included the 5 years here. But under the order of condition years, we would at that point likely request an extension to complete any work that has not been completed in the first 3 years and to continue the adaptive management and invasive species management for 1 or 2 years. If the commission is able to issue a 5-year order of conditions, then that 5 years of the order of conditions would line up with the YOPs without extensions. Throughout all of this time, there's likely going to be some administrative efforts around obtaining grant funding. The existing funding right now is for the approach surfaces, and the transitional surfaces would be funded through the FAA or Mass DOT, separately, as well as pursuing rights to additional properties that are within the VMP. But as those rights don't exist currently, we seek no work on those properties.
What's adaptive management is not, what is that in terms of it's not vegetation removal and it's not invasive species? What is?
That adaptive management is where we're proposing to go out and make sure the shrubs are regrowing, there's not bare spaces. If there are bare spaces, seeding with native seed mix. So that's the adaptive management is all of the research around vegetation management at airports say the native shrubs bounce back and are very robust, but we would be checking that.
I know we have a bunch of questions about the invasive species management process, so we'll hold on to those so we can do that at one time. I'm just trying to get a sense of how this is going out. How does this line up with the vegetation management plan's characterization of short-term plan and long-term plan?
Right, so as we've
Is that
discussed, the
reflected here in this?
short-term plan is the actions taken to get the airport into compliance. So like the short-term plan is the approach surface cutting, this original cutting. And then the long-term plan is the efforts to keep the area in compliance. So you may have elements of both plans at play. You know, once the approach surfaces have been cut, the short-term plan, the long-term plan is keeping an eye on it to make sure the vegetation, you know, that if there's trees below the maximum approach surface, if they shoot up and are a penetration again, that's being watched. That's the long-term plan. And then maybe, if needed, a strategic removal of, you know, that individual tree or a few trees versus a large area of clearing.
Yep.
So that's the long-term plan. So like, we would be in long-term planning on the approach surfaces, but then in 2027, that's the short-term plan for the transitional surface, because it's to bring it into compliance initially.
All right, so it's a bring it into compliance versus a maintenance.
Yeah.
So in the short term, since it doesn't actually align with, this is different, this is how you're going to proceed primarily on the removals on the approach. So it's bringing the airport into compliance in both the approach surface as well as the transitional surfaces?
Correct,
They are not in compliance with the transitional surfaces either?
correct.
Didn't get that part. Okay. So when you, let me see if this is a little bit challenging. Let me see if I can share something. I'd like to ask you.
And this is, I don't need to share the
okay.
remaining
Well,
slides. This was the most important one.
I just wanted to bring us
describe.
back to this basic slide.
Yes,
Because we talked before, and I just want to clarify this, that the area around the vernal pool, for example, I can't make it any bigger, in the first year of the plan, only about 40% of that buffer zone around the pool is going to be cleared. It's phased so that it's not all of it ever comes down at any one time. But this is not showing any, when does the rest of the pool get managed and
the
cleared?
rest of the pool is the lighter hatching, that is the
Yep.
transition area work. So that would be in the like 2027 to 2028 timeframe.
Let me just come in a little closer here so we can see. There we go. All right, so this initial portion would be the 2025,
Correct.
and then this is 2027 on all of the rest of it? The other-
Yeah, the rear
Roughly
part-
60 to 70%, it looks like?
Right, the rear part of the pool doesn't have cutting, but correct, the other, kind of the eastern side of the pool would be cut as part of the transitional surface work.
24, 25, 26, 27. So where I get concerned is when we have actions that are proposed now that take us beyond our 3-year limitation for the original order of conditions. Well, we still don't have a full answer on what we can do, but our understanding is that, at least as far as the activities that are regulated go, need to be identified and be within that first 3 years, and if they are then not completed, then the order can be extended. So I worry when I start seeing 2027,
The
Action.
2027 should be, if the permit is issued this spring in 2024, it would expire in the spring of 2027.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were proposing the work in like January, February 2027.
2027.
Within the 3 years.
Okay.
And then extensions to monitor the permit, the restoration work, the monitoring.
Okay, and then is that also true for the rest of the areas in our jurisdiction that are in the transitional zones or not being done in 2025?
Correct. We're proposing all of the transitional zone in early 2027 within the 3-year lifespan of the permit.
Okay. I'm going to stop because I want to go back to your, now that I have that, go back to your timeline. You can put that back up. There, okay. Now that's all clear. All right, so April 2027 is the outside for the initial management of the vegetation in the obstruction zones for both the approach and the transitional areas.
Correct.
Correct, okay. Well, that's a little bit, it's tight, but at least it's not invalid on its face at the start before we even get anywhere. So we'll continue to have conversations with making sure, we have a couple of other options that we're looking at that might also work to help us extend this order. Okay. Do you have other slides that you wanted to?
Next up was discussing the mitigation, starting with the invasive species removal. Unless you want to discuss
Yeah,
something
no,
else
I want to
first.
hold on that and
Sure.
come back to it, because I want to circle back to what is a foundational issue that Mark was beginning to address, and that is the extent of the area subject to the vegetation management.
Okay.
And why, and whether or not it is the appropriate area, or whether it's somehow larger than it needs to be, at least as far as the ecosystems are concerned. I mean, I understand about the safety issues, but I wanted to, I'm going to share here, if I can. Mark, I can't share my screen.
And I
There we
don't
go.
need
Okay,
to
I
share
can. No,
anymore,
I got it.
if that makes.
This is the list of, and the reason I say we'll come back, this is the list of the topics that we've identified that we want to run through, where we have some questions and some open issues. And so invasive species and mitigation come down. It's a little bit further. So let me just start with, so you have explained, Mark, the difference between, we hear a lot of terminology between existing Part 77, approach surface 2, approach surface 4, 4-5, TERPs, straight-in, circling. So these, it's been a lot to try to sort this out and get clear about it. But what I heard you say is that the existing, this is a map that was taken from the current airport management plan update. And the reason it caught our attention is that it's defined as existing Part 77 approaches for runway 6 and 24. And it's showing, and come in a little bit further, that the size at the end, it was 200 feet off the runway, but it's only 250 feet in width at that 200 feet off the runway part. Is that not an accurate depiction of the current Part 77 approach?
The current Part 77 approach is updated, so it's now 500 feet for the visual runway, having only visual approaches.
So this is out of date, essentially? Is that this?
Yes.
Well, we heard the select board last night conducting a hearing about taking a correction to the approach area mapping. Will be coming up at town meeting. And it was reflecting this very change I think we're talking about, because that says existing Part 77, and then Figure 5-5 in the management plan shows instrument night operations approach zone, which is the 400. So please help us once more. And I know I had a professor once who used to use the expression beating it with a dead horse. So with apologies to him, we are beating it with the dead horse a little bit, but it's important for us to understand that the area subject to the vegetation management is as accurate as it can be, because we have to make findings that this is exactly the right area.
So the Part 77 surface is a surface, is the overarching sort of guidelines, and then underneath that are different approach surfaces. So if the Part 77 surfaces are, it essentially comes down to the FAA deciding what surface that below that, within that Part 77 umbrella that we're clearing. So in this case, the actual Type 4 OCS that we're looking to clear is less than the Part 77 surface for the airport right now. So that, I wasn't, all I know is we're required to clear that, according to the FAA, the Type 4 OCS surface, and that's what we've designed our project for currently.
What is OCS surface?
Obstacle clearance surface,
Okay.
that's what the Type 4 you've been seeing.
So can you help us understand why this diagram shows something in a significantly smaller area impacting less vegetation?
I don't know.
Matt's raising his
Yeah,
hand.
Matt, if you, one of my colleagues can chime in on that.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Is there somebody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, whoever, you has your hand up there.
Matthew.
Yeah, good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Yes.
And thank you for allowing me to speak. So yes, Matt Karen with Gill Associates, I work with Mark. So
Okay.
at the time of the master plan, this was an existing visual approach surface for the airport. However, FAA Flight Procedures has published what they call an instrument approach for the airport. And so if you go to the other surface, the one that's wider,
Yep.
this is in fact the existing approach surface as it stands out there today. That's because the airport has an instrument approach. They have a GPS approach. So in order to satisfy FAA and FAA Flight Procedures, this is the surface that needs to be cleared. This is why we've included this as part of the vegetation management plan and in the project that's before the commission today. So this is in fact the existing approach surface for the airport today.
Okay, so I'll ask you the question then. So why was
Sure.
this smaller area included if it has been superseded by, and
Yep.
why does the town have to do a map change?
Yep, so there are multiple surfaces at the airport. Some are called visual and some are for instrument approaches. This one here, the dimensions on this are for a visual approach, which is a much smaller surface. The other surface
see.
that we were just looking at is for an instrument approach, and the airport has an instrument approach, and therefore that is the surface that needs to be cleared in order to satisfy that Type 4 instrument approach surface at the airport.
So is the airport currently being, are landings and takes off at the airport currently being subject to instrument approaches or visual?
Yes, they are. There are published instrument approaches by FAA Flight Procedures currently for the airport.
Okay, other questions about this? This was Dr. Thompson's slide that showed the difference between, and he referred to it slightly differently as Part 77 and 4-5, but what you're saying is that it's really depicting the difference between a visual approach area and an instrument approach area, and the instrument approach area is what is currently being conducted at the airport.
That is correct.
Do I have
Madam
all
Chair.
that right?
Okay.
Can I
Yes,
ask
you do.
a quick?
Yes, go ahead.
So is this an expansion of what's currently in use, or is this just to catch up what's currently the airport is currently doing?
Yeah, so if you look at like Chapter 100 and the previous approach surfaces, that's outdated. We're catching up to what is currently existing out there and what needs to be cleared for existing conditions.
So if for some reason, is there a way to not allow? I mean, if, let's say for some reason we turned you back, does that mean we go back to only visual approach at this airport?
I don't really know the answer to that. That's more of a question for FAA and Flight Procedures. I'm not sure how they would view that, what ramifications would be associated with not clearing that. That's more of an FAA question and not something that I'm able to answer.
And I understand the grant stipulations and having to follow those kind of things, so I do understand that. I was just curious.
Yeah, correct.
Are there questions on the area? Go ahead, you're
I
up.
don't know if I have questions because there's a lot of airport E's here, FAA E's and so forth, and I don't think anyone up here is qualified to parse it. All we know is we've had a he said sort of situation going on. Would it be possible to provide us with an FAA document that settles it for us, that says, yes, this is what it should be for you?
We did provide to you a certification letter from the Mass DOT saying
You
these
did,
areas
okay.
needed to be
All right.
cleared.
There have been a lot of documents, sorry.
There have been.
If I may just add to that too, there is an approved airport layout plan that is signed by both Mass DOT, the FAA, and as well as the airport. So which shows the current surface, the Type 4 surface that is approved by the FAA.
All right, so that issue is settled then, apparently.
In the eyes of the FAA
In the
and
eyes
Mass
of the
DOT
FAA.
and the airport, yes.
Okay. Does anyone have an alternative view of this?
You may.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is James Fulton. I am a municipal lawyer, admitted to practice in the state of Connecticut. 2019, my wife and I retired, and we are now domiciled at 132 Lakeshore Drive here in Chatham. I just want to discuss a point of law with you, if I may. On February 20th, I sent to this commission a memorandum in which I argued that because the wetlands at the Chatham Airport are what are known as marine discharge wetlands, the groundwater flows into the Nantucket Sound and into Pleasant Bay. Anything done in the wetlands at the Chatham Airport affects more than one town, and this matter should be treated as a DRI, Development of Regional Impact. After I wrote that memo to you, you made a discretionary referral, what you believe to be a discretionary referral, to the Cape Cod Commission, for which I'm very grateful. However, I still believe that your referral requirement was mandatory, and I have written the same memo pretty much to the Cape Cod Commission. I'm wondering, have you heard anything from the Cape Cod Commission since you made your so-called discretionary referral?
It's not so-called, we did do a discretionary referral. We heard this morning, and I'll cover that later in the, toward the end of the hearing, what we have time for. We just heard this morning about how that might likely be handled by the commission.
Okay, well, Section 12H of the Cape Cod Commission Act does say that if the Cape Cod Commission decides to take up a DRI, that you are required to suspend your review. And so if they are going to review it, I don't know why you would cut the legs off from under the agency to whom you have discretionarily referred the matter, especially since the applicant doesn't want to do anything until next winter anyway. But then again, you alone know what they said to you. I don't know.
I'll just correct one thing that you said. That requirement of suspending proceedings only applies to mandatory referrals.
I understand.
And does not apply to discretionary. We are expected and required to continue our process until such time as the commission votes on whether to accept the referral or not.
Okay. Well, again, I don't know whether what their vote was.
They haven't voted yet.
Okay. I would hope you would give them the opportunity to vote and make no decision until that time, because if they do want to take it up, I believe that your review isn't ended, it's simply suspended.
Yeah.
They say if they want to take it up, they should go first, and then you go second.
Right.
And so I would hope that that's what you would do, and I thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. We are mindful of all of those procedural complexities in this. And as in the 2005 initial airport master plan, the Cape Cod Commission did go first with their review before the Conservation Commission issued its order of conditions, because that commission incorporated by reference the conditions. So we were hoping and expecting to be able to follow that kind of a timeline. Thank you. That was not exactly about this. Do you have something?
Just to finish this off,
Yep.
this slide that we're looking at, is this Dr. Thompson's?
This is Dr.
slide?
Thompson's slide.
So,
Drawn from a comparison of this and this, if you look at
I'm just trying to, Dr. Thompson, to see if we can get into a position where we can say this is still an open issue or it's a settled issue.
So if you watch...
Please identify
Sorry,
yourself.
Michael Thompson.
Thank you.
For the record. Yeah, if you watch the select board meeting last night, you'll have seen basically the same sort of diagram which Terry Whalen presented with the Part 77 inside the that's the Part 77 Type 2 approach inside the TERPS Type 4. And there's quite a lot of extra area. And this happened or impacted you folks because the variance request that you received was for the Part 77. And indeed, the Part 77 is exactly what you was presented earlier by Ms. Dunk. So, and that is still current. I mean, that is the current approach for a visual airport, visual approach at an airport. And this is for now the Type 4 approach was sprung on you in a drawing because the drawing that came in the package that was delivered to you showed the Type 4 approach, which has the wider 400-foot perpendicular line there, perpendicular to the flight path, and is 400 feet wide, which is wider than 250 feet for the Part 77. That's still an anomaly. Your variance request, as far as I know, still asks for trees under Part 77. Your drawing is showing this. Now, whether there are... I have concerns about this so-called validity of the Type 4 approach being current, because I know that Type 4 approaches are not allowed to have penetration, and there is penetration of that approach at this point. So it seems to me that's a violation to operate that way. You cannot use the advantage of a Type 4 approach in many instances is that you can use instrument landings in poor visibility. And I do not think that as soon as you go to landings in poor visibility, you increase the dimensions of the RPZs, that is, these danger zones that are defined at the ends of the airport. And the RPZs currently include about 20 homes in Chatham. You can see, and it comes right across to the other side of Route 28, on this side of the runway, and on Agnes Lane on the other side. So it's almost moot. This airport, this Type 4 surface is not, to me, not giving anybody any advantage because the pilots still have to come down in visual conditions. I hope that helps a little bit. This is understanding what goes on at the airport is very confusing. People rely on a lot of documentation, FAA design rules, and so on. I'd like to make another point that was brought up earlier. As far as I know, we've done a little bit of research on this. Repayment has never been required by the FAA. You can break all the performance standards that you like, and they will not take the money back. That just hasn't happened. Another issue on well, let me just say that this is an unprecedented variance request that you've been granted. I mean, I sat in your chairs for quite a number of years, never saw anything like this. Removing trees under the existing visual, let me jump over that. It just is incredible to think of going into the vernal pool areas and decimating them in this way. And it's not really necessary. There are just no redeeming aspects to approving this request. It's only a beginning because there are other things that may come up. We have turboprops using this airport. They're now exceeding a threshold of what's called 500 operations, and the threshold requires the FAA to install new standards at the airport, and those would go in and they would require expansions at the ends of the airport and the sides of the runway, and take down a hell of a lot more trees than are being considered here. So if that happens, you'll be getting some more requests. I talked about an alternative analysis. That was mentioned earlier, the issue of runway displaced thresholds. I have to say that the displaced threshold was suggested in the AMPU, and that's the latest airport management plan. It's also shown in the layout plan, and it is in the FAA advisories. They show displaced thresholds there, and it's been applied to other airports in Massachusetts. It might inhibit thresholds, it might inhibit use of the airport by turboprops, but that would be a very safe thing to do because the turboprops are not meeting, the standards are not being met at the airport for the turboprops currently. Another alternative, of course, is for the turboprops to just use nearby Hyannis Airport, because the displaced threshold will still be perfectly satisfactory for any of the small planes owned by a half dozen residents of Chatham. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson.
Yep.
Mike.
Can I ask you a question, Dr. Thompson? Just going back to this particular issue, is it your understanding that the airport currently is authorized for Type 4 approach?
Sorry, you have to say that
Is the
again.
airport currently authorized for Type 4 and Type 2, or Type 2 and Type 4 approaches?
No, I can't really, I mean, it's interesting. You heard the representative from Gale there saying that both of them existed. Well, if they do exist now, then in fact that Type 4 is a consequence of the airport management plan. And there's the introduction today was that none of this was related to the airport implementing the airport management plan. That statement was a direct contradiction of that.
Well, I'm not sure if I understand your answer. It's just really sort of a yes or no. I listened to the presentation of the select board yesterday where it was stated by airport representatives that the airport currently is authorized for Type 4 landings. I don't know if I'm using the proper terminology here. I'm not an airport.
No.
I don't even get airplanes. I don't get airplanes if I can help it. But anyway, so it's either true or false.
Well, I was going to say Huntley is the person who should be addressing this.
Okay, fine.
And that would make good sense.
Yeah, yeah. I think building on what you said about, I think we were just clarifying: is the airport currently permitted by the FAA for instrument approach, straight line approach, and just visual approach?
Yes, come on up. Yes, please. Yes. Hello.
Yes, currently.
Identify yourself for the record, please. It's okay.
Huntley Harrison, Chairman, Airport Commission. Yes, currently the airport has two approach surfaces, a Type 2 approach, which is your visual approach surface, and a Type 4 approach, which is for your instrument approach surfaces. The airport has had, for many years, a circling approach, which is an instrument approach with 600 feet minimum altitude with the runway in sight. And we also now have a area navigation approach, an RNAV approach with GPS guidance for runway 24. And then if you have to go around for runway 6, you still have to go the circling route for that as well. And that's a Type 4 surface. So we have had both surfaces for a long time, and it's not just a product of the master plan or anything like that, because those instrument approaches have been there prior to when we started to develop the master plan. And airports have various approach surfaces depending on the type of operation that they have. If it's an air carrier, you're going to have, because they're larger planes, you're going to have a wider surface. As far as the turboprops are concerned, The turboprops are fine for this airport. There is no problem with the Type 4 approach for them. The number of operations that we have for the turboprops, sometimes they go over that 500 limit, but the FAA would have to rule on that. If the FAA felt that there were many years of going over that limit, then maybe they would ask us to make changes. But I don't think we would, because there's no room to do it. There's just plain no room. So, you know, we're fine with the way things are right now. So we're dealing with the clearance for the Type 4 approach, the red line, and that's what we've been dealing with right through the vegetation management plan, all along. And I don't know if Mr. Karen is still on, but he might have something to add to that, to maybe some more clarification.
All right, thank you very much. No, he does not. All right. Well, we did beat that with a dead horse, again. But it's an important issue about, oh, yes, hold on, we have one more comment. If it's on this subject, we're happy to hear it.
On the airport?
No, on the approach zone versus.
Oh, no, I don't understand any of that.
Okay.
I was gonna talk about what I know of the vernal pool.
Can, hang on to that, because we're coming to that in a few minutes. All right, thank you. Okay, Adrian and Mark, you can. Okay. All right. So with that, we want to talk about, we finished this, you did that, we did that. Okay, I don't care about that. We want to talk a little bit about the removal methodologies. We went through some of the things that you were proposing in terms of, we understand the difference between some of the mechanized equipment that would be involved. But I think we have questions about where hand cutting, which would not involve tracked equipment necessarily, which we worry about damaging the shrubs, might be appropriate. And obviously, we think in the buffer zone of the vernal pool, in the area around there, if there's a combination of hand cutting with the forwarder to be able to extract the pieces, the cut pieces, without dragging them through, which would damage the shrubs. So I wanted to open that up to see if people thought who wanted to address that as an option to.
Sure. You want me to start?
Sure.
Okay. If, Bob, can you go to share and go to this
I will stop.
page? If it's okay with you, I just want to go through the deck that you provided the last time at the meeting, because I had quite a few questions about it. Let me get to them. Yep. Okay. So the first thing I'd like to talk about or ask a question about is the vegetation removal standards and requirements, which is about page 4. Bob? Yeah, next one. Yeah. Okay, so you say under the avoid and minimize soil disturbance and erosion that if erosion occurs, you're going to stabilize soils in place. Wouldn't it make sense to stabilize the area before you do the work so that if something some erosion did occur, you've already got something in place to stop the erosion from getting down to the vernal pool?
Sedimentation barriers are proposed on the down gradient edge of work. So should erosion occur, which we hope it wouldn't, and we would follow, using the equipment to avoid erosion, it would not reach into the wetland.
Okay. So, Bob, the next one. You say you're leaving the shrubs.
Correct.
I'm not sure I understand how they will remain intact and viable, given you say, as intact and as possible during tree removal. To me, if you are using machines, they're going to be trampled, for lack of a better word.
Some of them are initially trampled or pushed over, and they grow back based on 30 years of VMP implementation at airports and in rights-of-way in Massachusetts. So this is seen on utility rights-of-way where they use matting that they put down, and then they drive over it with equipment and cranes to replace utility poles. And it's amazing. Within one growing season, the shrubs grow back pretty densely.
But do you have an idea, and I'm sure you probably will say you don't have an idea, but do you have an idea of how much lower shrubs and et cetera could potentially be damaged by this process? I mean, you have said for the vernal pool area, well, for all of the areas, you haven't given us an idea of how many trees are going to be removed. And I understand in the vernal pool, you say you can't because there's so many, you can't get a good reading on how tall each tree is. But do you have a reading on how much possibly of the lower area will be damaged through all of these processes? Because it does, in my opinion, potentially affect the whole area going forward. What if, as you've said, you'll seed if they don't come back naturally. And you're saying they do from your experience, but we don't even know what's there that might come back naturally. So how are you, I'm sure certain bushes or shrubs, if they're trampled, may not be as viable as other types. So how are you determining that?
So the vegetation that's there is primarily high bush blueberry and spice bush.
Okay.
Those are the primary species there. There's certainly other species around. And based on not my observations directly, but 5 years of study at 10 airports indicated that shrubs come back within one growing season, and there's minimal reduction. And there's actually typically an increase in shrub layer density.
And what causes that increase in density?
Increased
the fact
sunlight.
that the trees aren't there?
Increased access to sunlight.
Okay. All right. Bob, if you could go to the forwarder machine. I think this is where it was sort of mentioned, well, actually the feller buncher. I think that's the one that will grab the tree and it doesn't fall to the ground. Have you, and I know you've said that you're not actually doing the work, that you put it out for a bid and they determine how they will do the work. But to me, letting this machine at least keeps things from falling onto the ground and disturbing more of the area. Has it ever been considered that you use this along with hand cutting so that it's hand cut, but this just takes it out so that?
This machine does both at the same time.
Right,
so it
but
holds
others, how do you decide? Is it the width of the tree that determines that you potentially use this machine versus some others? Some of the others that you've given us, like the skidder or the forwarder, because all of those, it falls to the ground. So if there were wildlife in the ground, which we don't know what's there, wildlife, animals or, whatever, frogs, whatever, if these trees are falling on them, they're done. I'd be done if a tree fell on me. So I'm concerned about the fact that there's the potential for an awful lot of the trees to just be allowed to fall to the ground, and then they're picked up by a forwarder or by the skidder or whatever it is that you want to use, or they want to use, because it's not you doing the work. Can you address that? Why?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the absence of specific requirements from the issuing authority, which is you, we do defer to the contractor on
Right.
means and methods because they are forestry professionals. They cut forests across the state as part of forestry plans and other plans. So we do defer to their expertise. If the commission is concerned about falling trees on species, it is absolutely, you can put a condition that it must be performed with this equipment, or tree fall must be avoided, and then the contractor must abide by that condition.
Okay. Well, I'm not a vernal pool expert by any means. So I started looking for information on vernal pools and found a few things that I think may demonstrate why I'm asking these things. One was the Vernal Pool Association. It's a summary of protection in Massachusetts. Work may be permitted in vernal pool habitats if it will have no adverse effect on wildlife habitat, as determined by a wildlife habitat evaluation, which I don't think anybody has actually evaluated officially that area to say there is no habitat there.
I'm sorry, can you reiterate where these rules and performance standards are coming from? They're your bylaw?
No. This, as I said, this is from the Vernal Pool Association. It's a summary of protection in Massachusetts. I found it, I looked up vernal pools, and this was one of the articles. They say no amount of alteration of vernal pool habitat is allowed without a wildlife habitat evaluation because of the importance of the vernal pool habitat. Therefore, projects should not be issued a permit without a wildlife habitat evaluation having been completed, which demonstrates no adverse effects. And as I said, I'm not sure if we have any wildlife, any habitat there. And from what I think I know, at least I haven't heard you mention that you've had a habitat evaluation done there. Is that correct?
Under the Wetland Protection Act, habitat evaluation is only required for in-resource area work. And there's an Appendix A or Appendix B version, and they have to do with size of work within the wetland resource itself. As no work is proposed in the wetland resource, the Wetland Protection Act does not require wildlife habitat evaluation.
Okay. It also says no impacts are allowed that will alter the topography, soil structure, plant community composition and structure, and hydrologic regime, resulting in a diminished capacity to provide habitat functions. And seems we're altering the topography around this vernal pool, and it could alter. And I'm highlighting these things because I just think it's important that we understand part of our job is to protect the wildlife. And I just want to make sure that we've addressed all concerns, and that hasn't come up a whole lot.
Okay, I'd like to respond to that.
Yeah,
We are
I
not
want you
altering
to.
the topography because we are not digging, we are not filling. We are not pulling trunks, the root system out of the ground, so we are not altering the topography around the vernal pool. We are altering the vegetative community, but that is, the statement there was alteration to have an adverse effect, not on the wildlife, but on the wildlife habitat. And again, in the documentation that I shared last week, the guidance to conservation commissions, which was a summary of information prepared for multiple rounds of environmental impact reports in Massachusetts, it indicates that there's a change in the habitat from a forested to a shrubland community. It still provides wildlife habitat. The wildlife that use it may be slightly different. They may use it in a different way. Instead of perching, they may hunt, things like that. But it has not been found to be an adverse effect. It is a change, certainly.
Okay, and can you address you say that this is a phased approach of taking down the trees. how much around the vernal pool at any one time will be removed? One phase of operation.
So the first phase is the approach surface,
Right.
and it's about 35% of the area around the vernal pool, of the perimeter of the pool, of that kind of slice of the pie. And then in the future, the approach surface, which is another approximately 30 to 40% of the pool, that pie. And then that last remaining bit doesn't have proposed cutting in it.
Okay. Go ahead. Or Mike.
Yes. On this picture, it's on a hill, it's very dry, and you have a track machine in there. You're in a hole. Even you stated that the drive mats would not, you can't use drive mats because the drive mats going up and down a hole would be moving around. So if you're maneuvering around trees, you're angling the track machine. I've driven track machines for many years, and when you change your direction of the track machine without doing 50 turns, you're gonna move the soil, and that's gonna damage. You might not want to hear this, but really the only way to do it with the least damage to the wetlands would be to do it by hand.
And if the commission specifies hand cutting, we'll follow that.
It has to be done the old-fashioned way if you're to do it, and that's selective tree cutting down, because I can't see how you can do that with a machine without destroying the whole area. Thank you.
Another thing that I went to Mass Audubon, and they have a vernal pool fact sheet, and it says, even if a vernal pool itself is safe from destruction, which I know you're not destructing it, changes in the surrounding upland may disrupt the habitat and life cycles of the resident species. The removal of the surrounding forests may degrade a nearby vernal pool to such an extent that the amphibian population is eliminated. Can you speak to that?
I can again reference the studies completed by Mass DEP at other airport projects, which did include vernal pools, and they did not find a destruction of the vernal pool following cutting activities.
Can I just jump in here?
Yes, please.
So this raises the issue about this particular vernal pool and what we do and we do not know about it. It was certified back in 2005 or 7, which was a paper certification, so there was no actual on-site assessment done of this pool. What we don't know is what species are currently in that pool, how many, so there'd be no way of gauging whether or not there was any adverse impact on the species who use it based upon the work that was done outside. None of us, and Karen's done a lot of research and a lot of reading, but that doesn't qualify her or any of us to be able to figure out the answers to those questions. So we have, in consultation with the division staff, one of the things that we are authorized under our bylaw and regulations to do is to retain an outside independent expert on vernal pools to do an actual assessment of what's in there and to guide and advise us on what are the best protective measures that we can take to make sure that there is no adverse impact. We have that authority in our regulations. Luckily, it's the right time of year to do that assessment. We don't think it would take very long to go through that process. But I wanted to put that out there as an option because we can ask for a vote to authorize the agent to proceed with that concept and retain somebody to do the assessment and advise us.
If the commission wants to require a vernal pool study and/or a wildlife habitat evaluation, certainly a third-party review is within your purview. GZA does have wildlife biologists on staff. I personally am not one. However, we, if requested by the commission, can perform that study and provide the results.
Okay, that's a possibility. I don't know who is currently qualified. I think Paul Whiteman is compiling a list, so I would advise you to engage with him and talk about that. But at this point, I want to put it open for discussion of here whether we think that that is something that we ought to do. Cheryl's putting her finger on the button, so.
Well, I think the more information, the better, because there's a lot of this that we're wading through kind of blind, and I'd love to, excuse me, I'd love to know more. So yeah, I think it's a great idea.
And that was what I was trying to get to, was, as I said, I know nothing except for, now I'm learning from only what I can find on the internet. And I'm not comfortable making a decision without someone coming forward to say what exists in our vernal pool and in that area.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to do that because it's been almost 20 years since it was even certified as a vernal pool. So
Correct.
we have no idea.
100% behind it.
Sure, it's the crown jewel of the ecological niche that the airport occupies, so it does make sense to get a current, up-to-date assessment of it. But just to follow on, I actually want to make one additional comment, and I've been wanting to make this point, but this is a good time, because you mentioned the transition, that you mentioned the notion that the vernal pool, when it becomes altered, could be considered to be, in essence, an equivalent ecological area if it were transformed from a canopied to essentially a shrubland area. And I don't know if I have bought into that concept yet, because if you let everything, if all the people from the Cape disappeared and 50 years went by, there would be no shrublands on the Cape. There would be canopied.
There may be fires that set it back in time, so it's an earlier successional phase, but it's part of a natural, the transition from grassland and a herbaceous growth to shrub to forest is a natural.
It could transition, but ultimately the default state would be a canopied environment until a fire came through. And then eventually you would get back to that state and stay there until a fire came through. So I don't necessarily accept the idea, personally, that those two shrublands are equivalent to treelands. So I hear the argument, but it's not resonating with me. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
I just want to pile on to that with the observation that one of the things that distinguishes the relative value of one ecosystem over another is the degree to which they are healthy and stable and sustaining themselves in the state, or they are threatened or imperiled. So you said that the dominant species are highbush blueberry and spicebush. Did you find any evidence of scrub oak in any of the buffer zones around there?
Not to my recollection, no
No.
comment on that.
I was only asking because I had the same question. What is the relative value of a woodland versus a shrubland? And the answer partly lies in there are different kinds of shrublands that are listed on the Natural Heritage website that lists all of them, and then it does indicate their current status. And the only one that I found that a shrubland is imperiled in Massachusetts. So it immediately struck me that, it may be a possibility. I don't know whether it's not there because it's not an appropriate habitat for the scrub oaks to be, or why there aren't any there, but that would have raised it up in our estimation that if it's an imperiled ecosystem, that establishing that there would have high value, as opposed to just allowing the current shrubs. But anyway, that's what I wanted to ask you, is whether you had seen any there. And I have to assume, not knowing, that it might likely be because it's not an appropriate habitat for that species to be in. We are running over again, but we'll have to cut this and pick it up again. We have a couple more topics in terms of the request for variances, and we will talk about mitigation, and my idea of planting scrub oaks is probably off the list of mitigation, if it doesn't seem like it's, but we have some other ideas in terms of, I'll just throw it out here, I want to drill down next time on the suggestion that you made about conducting invasive species management throughout the entire site, not just the 2.2 acres that are within our jurisdiction, but the entire vegetation management site. We're all ears on that because we know that when trees are removed, invasive species will, that kind of disturbance tends to lend itself. And one thing we would like to see from you, we don't feel like we have enough information on what you're proposing about invasive species management. We normally get a management plan submitted that details the methods for which invasive species are being removed and managed, how the monitoring works, what actions are taken if invasive species are observed to begin to come back to the site. So we like to have that conversation because that would go a long way. If the entire site was managed for invasive species, would be something that we could support. So I'd like to put that on the list of things to talk about next time, along with, because we keep circling around this one, but I think it's time to take it on directly, the option of topping some of these trees rather than removing them, particularly around the vernal pond, to provide the shade that we suspect, and we're going to let the expert tell us, that the shading of the pond that is necessary for the certain amphibious species that are there, as well as perhaps some of the trees up at the northern end to preserve some canopy habitat. We know that topping, I mean, we went out of our way to prohibit it because of all the things that we know it does to trees. But this is a very unusual circumstance we're looking at. And I know that some of us in conversations, have indicated a willingness to consider it as an option. So I'd like to put that out there for you to come back and let's talk about that. The one thing I'll say, last thing to talk about is for the removal process for the invasive species management, we will be looking to put in the order of conditions a requirement that an independent outside monitor, an environmental monitor, is retained to observe the processes and and report back to us on all of these different processes that are going to be undertaken. So we can talk about that next time.
That's very common on
Yeah.
these projects, and we have no objection to that.
Okay, that's great. That's good. I had referred to earlier that about the current state of the Cape Cod Commission. We received some word this morning, and I hope I'm not speaking out of line here, but it seems to indicate that they are going to require a major modification under the 2005 permit, but under the current policy plan, rather than the old previous policy plan, but a major modification with a full review of the entire vegetation management plan, conducted with full public hearings before the entire commission. That was the outcome that we were hoping for when we did our referral. So I believe, although I'm not 100% sure, that that determination is going to be coupled with a denial of the referral because it's going to be covered under their own processes. So that's what we've heard. There hasn't been a vote yet. There hasn't been a determination. I do think it's a decision that the executive director is authorized to make on her own. I'm not sure if the entire commission has to vote on this, but if it goes in that direction, we can keep going while they're doing that, because they're doing the major modification under the 2005 DRI. So we'll see if that goes. And that's it. I wish we could have covered the rest of our points, but some of this was, Paul has his hand up. Uh-oh, he's going to tell me I spoke out of turn. Yes, Paul.
Yes, Madam Chair, just the municipal lawyer got up a few minutes ago to speak. I just wanted to say if you're going to have any discussion at the end of the agenda about the airport, an unforeseen business, or you're taking care of it now, yes, the Cape Cod Commission wants to hear from you. So I think you could poll the commission as to whether you think the staff recommendation that the Cape Cod Commission is making, that they review a major modification of the 2005 permit with full hearings before the Cape Cod Commission to allow anybody to speak or address any issues that they have, rather than proceed as a limited discretionary referral. And the regulatory officer there told me yesterday that this issue of whether there's a 7-year expiration on that permit does not apply to the vegetation or the 2005 conditions that were set. And in the 2005 permit, they can continue to review the vegetation beyond the 7 years. That was her legal, she's a lawyer, that was her legal analysis. So they want you to, today, I think, so we can get back to them and see if this option that they're recommending their staff's recommending to the Cape Cod Commission should proceed the way you just described it.
Okay, that's good. We are prepared to take a vote to support the recommendation of the Cape Cod Commission staff that the pending application be treated as a major modification request under the 2005 permit DRI with full review of the entire vegetation management plan, coupled with
So moved.
denial of our limited discretionary referral.
Yes. Gordon second.
Roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So you can convey to them that we support that recommendation. Okay, and is there anything?
Janet,
Oh,
We have to
There was
move
one
for
woman in the
yes, yes, come, please take, I said I would come back to you after we talked about the vernal pool, so now it's the right time.
And then I have to move for the consultant.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm Dee Dee Holt, live in Chatham. Like I said, I don't understand any of that airport runway stuff, but it seems to me there's enough controversy about what it means and what it doesn't mean and what the alternatives might be that it should cause pause to, seems issue any kind of a permit. That said, it's so ironic. I'm here to talk about saving trees, and right before we're talking about, tearing them down. But I'll go on. Over 100 years ago, Massachusetts passed the shade tree law, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 87, and it was designed to protect shade trees because that is exactly what they do. They provide shade. If you walk along any street, there's a 10-degree difference roughly between walking under a shade tree and just walking out into the sun. So my concern is that a vernal pool is not going to react well to a 10-degree increase in temperatures. So that is my first comment about why would you want to do this to a vernal pool? And topping, I guess you mentioned that's an alternative, but we all know that is a really bad idea for trees. Mm-hmm. So the 10-degree difference is a health issue for us, but it's really a matter of survival for these animals that rely on the vernal pool habitat. And speaking of habitats, tearing down trees anywhere is a bad idea. Habitat degradation is the main reason for the decline of animal populations. So I think anything that it requires the extent of trees that coming down that this particular proposal does really should be considered very seriously. So back to the vernal pool. Therefore, with the Cape Cod Commission also wanting to review this, I don't see how you could permit this. I think you are going to postpone this. I would strongly recommend just denying the permit at this point. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. I don't think that we need to postpone anything. It's taking us, we're moving at a slow pace, just because we're, like you, struggling with understanding all of the various complexities in this. But I think we're making progress. You need to make a motion
Yes.
to,
I move that we authorize our conservation agent, Paul Whiteman, to proceed with the process of hiring a vernal pool consultant.
Gordon second.
roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That's unanimous. So, Paul, you may initiate that process, and I would ask Adrian to speak with you about. All right. So, in terms of continuing, the next hearing.
Would be April
April 3rd?
3rd.
Your previous agenda had the 27th as our.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, wait,
Next one.
you're right, the 20th we couldn't do. The 27th is actually, you're right, the next, do you want to do that? Pick
Yeah,
us up on the
absolutely.
27th? Okay,
You're
we'll
on
keep
my
going.
calendar.
We are, keep going. Let's do that, continue to the 27th.
I move that we continue the airport to the meeting on March 27th, 2024 for a notice of intent.
Gordon second.
Roll call vote. Bob?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
And I vote aye. We will see you back here in 2 weeks from today. And we'll hopefully finish our list of issues and see where we are at that point, and see where we are on the vernal pool. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that will be ready to go.
Yes,
Please.
and would you mind sending your agenda for
Yep,
today's
if you- I'll-
meeting so I can
I'll-
make sure we're
We'll
responsive?
swap with you on yours, because I want your timeline.
Absolutely.
We'll need that for any kind of an order we do. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Paul, we are ready to move on.
Is he on another call?
He may be, so I'm going to go ahead and read it, because he may be on a call. He's calling the Cape Cod Commission. This is 16 Sea Pine Road.
55 Linnell is.
Oh, I don't have the current thing. You read it if you have it. I don't.
I gotta open it.
I'm here.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, we're
Okay.
opening
Yep,
and
all right.
continuing Linnell.
Yes. Let me read it. 55 Linnell Lane, Pamela J. Kindler, map 16J, parcel 1A, R2, SE10 3664, proposed swimming pool and patio, alteration of existing septic system, minor location change for an existing shed, and the applicant's requested a continuance to April 3rd, 2024.
I move that we continue 55 Linnell Lane to the meeting on April 3rd, 2024 for a notice of intent.
Gordon second.
Roll call, Bob.
Aye.
Elise.
Aye.
Mary.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Cheryl.
Aye.
I vote aye, that's unanimous. April 3rd it is. All right, now we get to Sea Pine, Paul.
Okay, I figure if I read these fast, I might be able to cut a minute off the meeting.
Okay.
16 Sea Pine Road, Edward F. Acton, map 11I, parcel 2, HC3, SE10 3673. Raise existing dwelling, construct new house, and detached garage and pool patio with a land management plan.
Hi, good afternoon. Teresa Sprague. Oh, and Thad is here. Yay. I'm going to let Thad start the
Just
introductions.
made it. That's cutting it close, Thad.
Hi, Thad Eldridge, East Southeast. I thought we had Linnell Lane.
It's continued.
It was continued.
All righty. So 16 Sea Pine Road. We have an existing site that conforms to zoning, so we don't have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. We will be going to the Board of Health for an additional bedroom and an innovative alternative septic system. We have an existing home in the 50 to 100 of a coastal bank. There's also a bordering vegetated wetland down below for the lily pond.
Yeah.
The proposal is to take down the home, which is non-conforming to the side yard setback, not that you care about zoning, but it's to propose a conforming dwelling on the property. And there we go. The existing septic tank is within 50 feet of the top of the coastal bank. We'll be taking that out and putting it outside of the 100, along with the septic system. So we have a proposed dwelling, dry lane patio, pool, and garage, a little bit of driveway within the 50 to 100. The variances that we have requested, there's a little bit of grading that we'd like to do where that patio is. That's to eliminate the need for a handrail. And we're over the 35% threshold in the 50 to 100. To make up for these, we have Teresa doing a land management plan with a bank that's fairly invaded, but she can tell you all about that.
You guys are really good.
How are you guys today?
Uses one. Oh my God.
Caitlin Camilleri for Blue Flax Design. So today for 16 Sea Pine, our plan proposes invasive species management and native plant restoration in approximately 11,537 square feet between the edge of wetland and 50-foot buffer to the top of coastal bank. An additional 3,024 square feet of restoration will be implemented within the 100-foot buffer after construction is complete. The site is currently vegetated with oak trees, pitch pine, black cherry, eastern red cedar, American holly, and invasive sycamore maple as a canopy layer. And the understory and ground cover layers are almost exclusively comprised of invasive species, which include porcelainberry, bittersweet, shrub and vine honeysuckle, border privet, English ivy, multiflora rose, and garlic mustard. We'll treat these invasive species with an EPA-approved systemic herbicide, and they'll be removed mechanically or by hand and brought to an off-site disposal area. And we'll continue invasive species management for 3 successive growing seasons. We'll be removing 6 native trees on this site, and I would like to point out my error. I wrote 7 native trees, and then you probably tried to count 7.
We were stymied trying to count 7.
That's my first question.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
Okay.
so there are 6 native trees that we're proposing to remove. And they'll need to be removed for construction of the new dwelling with an additional large black cherry that's found on the resource area slope. It's in poor health, and we're proposing to flush cut it to the ground. And the other native trees to be removed include crabapple, black walnut, and American holly, and black cherry trees. They'll be replaced with 12 native trees that include eastern red cedar, red maple, and amelanchier or serviceberry. And a biodiverse native plant community made of 386 native shrubs will be planted in our project area. And when thinking of like the wildlife value of these plants, what they have to offer, we consider things like fruiting times of plants to offer forage throughout the year for wildlife, different flowering times of plants to offer pollination opportunities for bees, insects, and birds. And we consider which plants host high numbers of insects and caterpillars, which are the foundation of baby birds' diets. So when thinking of wildlife value, we're thinking of those things. These native plants are also valued for their ability to hold steep sandy slopes, which helps reduce erosion, and for their drought and salt spray tolerance. We are also proposing to plant the area to the south of the pool and patio addition with native shrubs and perennials to enhance the aesthetics and offer further wildlife value of that area. And all work proposed will have no adverse impact on the resource areas, which are the coastal bank and vegetated wetland, and the native plant communities installed will ultimately benefit and strengthen these resource areas. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me open it up to questions and comments from commission members. I'll start on this side. Mary, any questions or comments? I'm going to move from the end down.
I will ask the question that I think I already know the answer to, but I'm assuming the owner insists on the pool, because that's adding a lot to the 50 to 100. And I see where there's limited other places to put it, but was there any alternative besides using the ocean, which is right down the street?
Can you get the sharks out of the ocean?
They've been there all along.
Yeah, but we kept them at bay at one point.
Well.
So when you see the pool truck drive around with the sharks on the side with the,
No, yes.
So
Besides that, I mean, was there any other location for the pool?
this was the first location that was selected through the applicant and the architect, so we've put it forward. We do have plans for an auto cover. There is a wall on the seaward side or the south and the east sides, so it's safe while it's open. It has that 4-foot drop that would be required other than the fence. And everybody wants a pool in the backyard rather than front.
Well, when the water's over there, and that's.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think putting a retaining wall in the NDZ is a bad example to set. I understand everybody wants a pool these days. You have to, you know, we have to weigh what we're at and where you're at. I understand.
And if I may interrupt, the retaining wall is outside of the NDZ. It's a little bit of grading at the base of the retaining wall so that we have less than 30 inches of exposed face. It's right in, hang on. So that's to avoid.
Oh, that's the 50 to that's the 100.
So the retaining wall is 51 feet, 52 feet away from the coastal bank. So it's outside the NDZ. The fill below the retaining wall needed to keep that retaining wall less than 30 inches in height so that we don't need the handrail.
Well, let me retract. How about, you know, all limit of work should be out of the NDZ? You know, is there any possible way to move it towards the road? Because you want to take out the ailing trees that are next to the garage. So why can't the project, maybe a smaller pool and a little smaller decking, can be moved a little closer to the road? And then that way you don't have any disturbance whatsoever.
So the house placement, the pool placement were for the views. We already have a cleared area here, and pushing things further away would require cutting down trees, or proposing to cut down trees within the NDZ in order to gain the same views. So we're taking advantage of what's already there.
And if I may, Teresa Sprague with Blue Flax Design, we in thinking about the pool location, we worked with the applicant on this, understanding that a little bit of grading would be required within that area, which is already going to be disturbed for invasive species removal. It's entirely invaded. And in thinking of the pool location, this is a really robust mitigation plan. We're looking at 12,000 square feet of invasive species removal and restoration. The entire NDZ is going to be completely restored and entirely vegetated. So we really did consider the mitigation and the impacts, potential impacts of the pool, and putting forward a really robust mitigation plan with the idea that the entire 50-foot buffer, and we've even moved the pool equipment. The pool equipment was originally supposed to be around the pool. We felt very strongly that we should plant the entire area around the proposed swimming pool. So moved the pool equipment over to the other side, outside of the NDZ, by the garage, in order to allow us to plant that entire area to the south and directly to the east of the swimming pool. So we really did think this through, understanding that this was the applicant's preferred location for the pool and thinking of how best to mitigate for that.
Cheryl?
Wow. The interesting thing is there's so much of this property outside of the 100. And you're gonna put a septic system and a driveway out there. And you're gonna cram everything else in this small portion from the 50 to 100. And pretty much cover all the, I understand all the wonderful things you're gonna do, but it just seems like you're pretty much covering that entire swath between the 50 and the 100. And I understand the view issue, and everybody likes a good view. But boy, it just seems like something's got to give and come out of that space. If it's the garage that goes over and you put the pool where the garage is, or something. But everything feels like it's right up to the line of the 50. And it just, I don't know, I'm uncomfortable with so much there when there is other parts of the property that's available.
I think that goes to the issue of the coverage in the outer aura at 55% requires a variance. And as part of that analytical process, feasible alternatives are supposed to be examined. And this property kind of screams feasible alternatives to jamming everything into the outer aura. Yes, there are trees out there on the perimeter near where the septic system is being proposed, but it's a large flat area. And you're already proposing pulling out some trees. So I think taking another look at what can be moved out of the outer aura will go a long way toward A, reducing your coverage, and B, demonstrating seriousness of intent in terms of really examining feasible alternatives to this. Bob, you ready to?
Pile on?
Yep.
Yeah, it was my first reaction as well. I understand how they want the views where the pool is from the house, and so that's why my thoughts turned to the garage. And I know you had some language in your application about how if you move the garage back, such and such would happen, but it still seems like there's an opportunity there to move it back a little bit. Maybe you can get us closer to the 35%, I don't know. That was my thought as well. I do have a question for the mitigation plan though also, and that is that, that's not a question, it's an observation. It's a lot of it, absolutely, but of course in the wintertime it's hard to tell, but it seems like it's bordering, there's a very long border with invasive community on all three sides. So I'm just wondering, you know, it's a no-win situation, but when you plant that much mitigation next to invasives, who's going to win? And how can you give a fighting chance to your mitigation?
Right, would we probably implement a mow strip put a mow strip on the property lines to kind of try to manage the encroachment of invasive species from neighboring properties, but it's a challenge.
A challenge indeed, and that's
Yeah.
just on the property lines, but the part that's down in the, I guess it's a wetland. You can't put a mow strip there.
If I may, to the east, I believe that was Wilkinson that just.
Which way is east?
To the right.
Okay, right.
Wilkinson Ecological, I believe, was the firm that just completed a land management plan on the Hewens property at 32 Sea Pond.
Oh, over
So,
there?
Over there.
Oh, I see.
So
Yes.
that takes care of half the
Oh.
problem.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent.
So now we just have to worry about the south and keeping those invasives
Right.
at bay.
So do you have a mow strip part of your plan?
It's not on the plan, I can put it on.
Or do you think it's a good idea?
I think the area to the south is a driveway, and then there's arborvitaes that are just off property. So the area and then just a little bit in the area to the south, in that area. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yes, it's quite steep, but we can certainly implement that, knowing that the invasive vegetation has been managed throughout other areas of the property, and then in our experience, as you get down into the wetland resource area itself, generally it transitions into a native plant community. It's always the buffer into the wetland resource area in the BVW situation where we really have the heavy amount of invasive vegetation. So we are not proposing to remove anything within the resource area itself. It's a healthy plant community within the resource.
Okay, so maybe a mow strip?
Sure, we could do a mow strip along that southern portion, I think that you're talking about, on that steep edge, yes.
All right.
Yep.
And have you proposed demarcation for this?
I'm sorry.
I don't think I saw it. Demarcation of the mitigation area. In other words, you know, the traditional border of some kind to keep the landscapers
So-
from going in there.
We were proposing for most of that, the walkway would be right at the edge of the
Right.
mitigation.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So you'd be able to use that walkway as the guide.
Yeah. For some of it, yeah.
Yeah. But then it goes right up to the patio, right up to the pool. It's just behind the garage.
Yeah, I see what you
that we
mean.
have.
All right, yeah.
And even behind the garage, we were proposing a stone surface. that
It may
would go
not
up
be
to the
necessary
edge.
here. Yeah. Yeah, okay, thanks.
If you could do this, Thad, I picture this, and we've talked about all your toys in your office and LiDAR and all that. I look at the new house with the patio and the pool, and what I want to do is pick it up with my fingers and just move it closer to the driveway and angle it a little bit to get it a little more beyond the blue line. Now, that's a very simplified look at what you do for a living. And I apologize for that.
No.
That's the way we click and drag, right?
It's just a couple of lines.
I heartily apologize for that. My initial reaction was very similar to everybody else's, especially Cheryl's. It's a lot of driveway, the garage is there, and the house is sort of in the same spot as the other one was, but more into the zone. I don't know if just a skosh, just, that's for what it's worth. I love.
He's marking one skosh.
I don't know how much a skosh
I'm sorry, is that a standard or an imperial?
We maybe better look that up.
Yeah, if it can just be slightly moved, and I get it, it's a beautiful spot. That's my thought,
I just
as
have
odd as they are.
I have a quick question on the restoration. I understand that indigenous species, you can't get them too big because they don't do well. You regarded the service trees as trees, okay, but you're proposing a 7-gallon pot. There's no sizes on these plants. Some of these plants, I really find that are really small. I've looked at different resources on buying plants. If you're regarding us, I know it's a multi-trunk, but 7 gallons, there's no size. You should be able to get bigger stock of plants than what you're proposing here. For instance, viburnum, 3-gallon pots for viburnum. I would think, because in your goal 3, it says restore native plant species within the restoration areas to provide high-value cover foliage. So you're taking things down that are 10 feet, regardless, a lot of them are invasive. For instance, honeysuckle do have food for birds, but they consider it junk food. You want to restore some type of cover for the animals. Of course, they're using the existing property as foraging. Of course, we're going to take that away. There's nothing you can do about that. That's progress. But I'm looking at these plants, viburnums, 3-gallon. You should be able to get easily 4 to 5 foot viburnums. You got 3-gallon fragrant summer sumac, in your inkberries, in your northern, your bayberries. I think we can get bigger stock than this.
So if I can, you absolutely can get bigger stock than this, yes. And certainly the service berries we can. 3-gallon size is the standard container size used for mitigation planting. Once we get bigger than that 5, 7, 10-gallon size, they take longer to establish. They need more inputs in order to get them established. Bigger than that, you're looking at ball and burlap. We're also working on a steep slope, so we're trying to minimize and be able to plant these.
Well, you're minimizing for you.
We are,
but not minimizing for us.
Well, what I was going to say, though, is when you put in a plant at a 3-gallon size versus a plant at, let's say, like a ball and burlap size, your root system is going to establish far more quickly on a smaller plant. So it takes less time for the root systems to get established, and therefore you get more rapid growth.
For a 3-gallon plant, how many years are we talking? 20, 30?
You're going to start putting on 2 to 3 feet of growth a year after the second to third growing season. This has been our standard. 3-gallon has been the standards.
Well, I would like to urge my fellow commissioners to reconsider the size of the plants that are on these. I have never done mitigation the size of you've done mitigation, but mitigation that I've done for my customers, and I would never have me put the small 3-gallon. I put in bigger, and they've done just fine. I think if your goal 3 is to restore native plant species within the restoration areas that provide high-value cover, foliage, and breeding habitat, should be a bigger size.
So the only other thing that I would add to that is the condition of this site, and the degraded condition of this site didn't happen in 2 years, it didn't happen in 3 years, it happened over decades. Restoration does take time, so we do start with smaller plant sizes, and we've been doing this. I've been doing this for 15 years. 3 gallons plant sizes are standard. You find that by the time we're looking for a certificate of compliance, we've got root systems that are well established and plants that are putting on significant foliage and stem growth with that particular size of plant. But we don't expect restoration. The other thing that I think is important to know is that there's currently no existing ground cover layer on this site. We've crawled up and down this slope. Once we remove the invasive vegetation, it's completely shaded out. Honeysuckle's allelopathic, doesn't allow ground cover to establish around it. We restore the ground cover layer with a mix of deep-rooted native grasses and wildflowers, warm and cool season. Establish that area, get the ground cover layer established while we continue to do follow-up invasive species management. The seed bank on this site is tremendous. We know we're going to have a significant amount of resprout. We get in for the first growing season, specifically focus on follow-up invasive species management while the ground cover establishes. And then once that ground cover is established and we reach that 80 to 90% control of invasive vegetation, we start replanting the woody vegetation. So we've got a stable slope with a solid ground cover layer, mature, stabilized ground cover layer established, and then we start planting the woody vegetation back. I do agree that we can do better than a 7-gallon. We can increase the size
Well,
of
you
the
have
amaranth here.
viburnums at 3 gallons.
That
I know
is
viburnums grow
standard.
very easy.
Sure.
You could easily get 4 to 5 foot viburnums,
You
and they do quite well.
You can, and they're ball and burlap, and they actually don't do as well as container plants. And this is, and it sounds like you have
You're right, the
multiple
B and
years.
Bs don't do as well as container plants,
Yeah.
but you can get 7-gallon easy viburnums that are a decent size that will do quite well in a restoration project.
Yep, yep.
If I may, the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension planting list, their recommendation for viburnum is 2-gallon for planting for
Unbelievable.
mitigation. And that was created by a number of professionals and specialists, landscape architects and other ecologists.
Can I pile on? Yeah. All right, I'm going to continue the sentiment of most of my colleagues. I would like to see things moved further back. Everything is, I mean, the patio comes right to the 50. I mean, when you're talking about coverage in the 50 to 100, this is, a lot of it's coming right on top of our 50. So it's just outside of our NDZ. And, you know, there's quite a bit of patio. I do think that if you had less driveway, which I know most of it's not in our jurisdiction, and I'm assuming it's permeable.
The plan is to have it permeable. We also have a bioretention proposed that's outside of jurisdiction.
Right.
To pick up the stormwater. And
I
then
did read that.
We do have dry wells that are proposed outside of
Right.
the 100.
But if you cut down the driveway a bit and you could move the garage back, the house, the pool, I think you could still have a view. I'm not saying put the pool where the driveway is or where the garage is. I understand wanting to have your view. And I mean, while I swim in the ocean and I'm not too worried about the sharks, I guess others aren't quite as comfortable, and I get it. But I think it needs to be considered that we move everything back.
Let me just summarize then where we end, because we've just hit our time. So we will send you a way to reconsider the coverage in the outer aura, however you do that, whether it's through moving or shrinking or a combination of moving and shrinking, up to you. Up to them, to the homeowners to retain their view and do whatever moving and shrinking reduces that to a point, and we don't know, you know, somewhere between 35 and 55, so that you probably still will need a variance, but you may be more successful at getting the votes you need for it if you shrink it. So add the mow strip that we talked about. Consider some larger plant sizes and bring that in. Also, wherever you end up, please identify the trees that are being removed, proposed to be removed, and mark them on site, because they weren't this time.
I didn't prepare the staking sheet on this, someone in my office did, so.
Okay, well.
I was a little off weather.
It's okay, so, but next time, make
Yes, you
sure,
can't-
so we go see it.
No more health issues. It's
No
not-
more health issues.
Yeah,
That's the
honestly,
plan.
please.
You don't have time for that?
All right, so how long do you estimate that will take? When do you want to
Do we have a
schedule
meeting
the?
in 3 weeks, or?
We have in 3 weeks, 1, 2, 3 is April the 3rd or April the 10th.
Let's try for April the 3rd.
All right.
Okay. I move that we continue 16C Pine Road for a notice of intent on April the 3rd, 2024.
Gordon, second.
Roll call. Bob?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
And I vote aye, that's unanimous. We'll see you back here on April the 3rd. Thank you very much. With that, we're going to take a 5-minute quick break to refill waters and do other things, and then move on to the last 2 NOIs and the tree protection bylaw.
Four
I
NOIs.
know.
Four.
Continue. We're back. Mary Sullivan had to leave for another engagement, so Crystal, she has left at 3:15, 3:10. All right, Paul, we are ready to move on to the next NOI. Maybe Paul's not back. Planting plan.
We start again, Janet, or?
Yep, we are on for
All right.
Beach Plum.
Did you read it?
Nope,
Okay, look at that. I made it right back in time. Look at
you're
that.
perfect.
I'm so proud of myself. Okay. 10H Beach Plum Road, R. Paul, Detweiler, I'm terrible with names. Map 4D, parcel 23, DEP number SE 103674. Proposed project, demolition of an existing single-family home and cottage, and construction of a new dwelling and cottage within land subject to coastal storm flowage.
Good afternoon, David Clark, Clark Engineering. With me is Teresa Sprague from Blue Flax Design, and the owner, Paul Detweiler, is here in the audience. So, as stated, we're looking for an order of conditions to demolish the existing house and cottage and build a new house and cottage. Outlining the resource areas that are involved. The primary dwelling that's down by Taylor's Pond is in the floodplain. There's a 11-foot, 12-foot floodplain immediately adjacent to the pond, and the 11-foot contour floodplain extends into the property and engulfs the old cranberry bog that's to the east of the driveway. Associated with that floodplain, there's a coastal bank to the east of the house, and that coastal bank dives into the corner of the house and then comes out the other side, the northeast side, and then follows the driveway, where then it stops being a coastal bank because the slope is less than 10-to-1. As I stated, there's an old cranberry bog to the east. It hasn't been a cranberry bog forever, but there are the old waterworks that connected it for drainage purposes to Taylor's Pond. That drainage system does allow storm water to get into that bog and kind of checks it for invasive species growth, which Teresa will get into in her presentation. So concentrating on the main dwelling, one of the project goals was to not deviate far from the existing footprint, and so that was one of the design criteria from the beginning. So you'll see that although the new house is just a little bit bigger than what's there, it is right almost in the same footprint of the existing house. There's some patios existing patios that have been converted to a deck, so you'll see a deck expansion to the east towards the driveway, and the patio that is in front of on the water side of the house is going to be changed to a deck. One of the issues with the existing house, if you've been out to the site, the back side of the house, specifically the northwest side of the house, is close to the toe of that slope. Very poor air circulation, very poor sunlight, and you'll see, if you've been out there, you see the retaining walls are failing. So one of the goals of the project is to open that up a little bit, and so we can get some sunlight in there and get some air in there and protect the new house from degradation. We show the retaining wall being moved a little bit further away from the house. Then you also see that the retaining wall is now stepped. In my project analysis and alternatives analysis, I talked about why we chose the stepped wall as opposed to one steep or high wall. Briefly, a higher wall would require the excavator to dig further into the bank to provide the anti-tipping footing for the wall. So that's why we chose to do a stepped wall. Less work for the most part for the contractor. We don't know until we really get underway in the project. We might be able to eliminate the upper wall, the third wall, but given the topography and we've thought it best to get it permitted this way. If there's a way to not do it, we certainly will not do it. It's not for any other reason than to stabilize that slope and get it further away from the house. The alternative to building a higher wall, and again, it was in the narrative, is to move the whole project to the east 5 feet. But one of the project goals was to save that large cedar tree that's on the driveway side of the house, and we really want to save that tree. So there's going to be extra effort made during the construction process to secure the perimeter of that tree so that not only the tree itself, but the root structure is preserved during construction. Other than that, again, it's just a slight increase in the size of the house. In conjunction with that, the driveway is being reduced in size. The southern edge of the driveway is being pulled back from the top of the bank to make improvements in that portion of the property. Moving on to the cottage. The cottage is almost, well, it's about halfway out of the no disturb zone. Again, we're trying to keep it in the same location as what's there. Another one of the primary goals from the beginning of the project, directed by the owner, was we want to preserve the trees between the cottage and the lower driveway. So we've established a work limit, not just on the wetland side, but around the perimeter of all those trees so that nothing gets disturbed during construction. Other than the deck, the expansion of the cottage is away from the easterly old cranberry bog. To afford access to a garage, we're proposing a retaining wall that again goes towards the north, away from Taylor's Pond. And the final aspect of the project is to provide new utilities to the property. This house is, the main house is coming up on, I think, 90 years old. So the utilities have been there a long time and they need to be upgraded. This project has to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. No changes to the septic systems proposed. We're not adding bedrooms. I'd be happy to answer any questions on the site plan.
Okay, thank you. Do we want to move on to the mitigation planting plan and then have at it all together? Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon again, Teresa Sprague with Blue Flax Design, here on behalf of Paul Detweiler. I'm just going to go over the existing conditions very briefly. As far as the vegetation, David's covered all the resource areas, et cetera. Directly around the house, we've got patchy tufts of Cape Cod lawn mixed with native grass species, mainly Carex pennsylvanica. While the wetland itself appears to be healthy, we see native groundsel bush, cattail, and sedges. The top of the coastal bank or the area around the vegetated wetland are entirely invaded, nearly 100%, with invasive vegetation, including bittersweet shrub, honeysuckle, multiflora rose, autumn olive, winter creeper, burning bush, and then native but aggressive poison ivy and raspberry. Native trees and shrubs that are consistent throughout the site are cherry, pitch pine, eastern red cedar, red and white oak, birch, mountain laurel, and then there is non-native species including miscanthus grasses, English ivy, mugwort, yew, and periwinkle throughout the area. So what we're proposing in the project is a significant invasive species management project. We're looking at just over 12,400 square feet of invasive vegetation removal within jurisdictional areas and restoration of native vegetation. As David pointed out, for the construction of the walls, we do need to remove some pitch pines. 1 eastern red cedar, 4 pitch pines, 2 oaks, and 1 cherry are going to have to be removed for the construction of the walls and the construction of the cottage. And we are proposing to replant with 25 native trees throughout the entire restoration area to mitigate for the loss of those trees for the wall construction. We kept the limit of work on this project as tight as we could possibly keep it in order to minimize disturbance directly around the house. There's a great duff layer of pine and pine needles and oak leaves throughout that area that are supporting Gaultheria, Pennsylvania sedge, and other native grass species. And we really want that to remain largely untouched, which is part of the goal of this plan. Saving the eastern red cedars, as David pointed out, the one that's right against the existing house, as well as the eastern red cedars that are just to the east of the driveway, within the 50-foot buffer to the vegetated wetland, was also an important part of this project. So we worked to shrink the size of the driveway, still allow room for the property owners to get down the driveway, back up, turn around, make a 3-point turn and pull back out, but ensuring that we were not endangering those eastern red cedars along the edge of the driveway. As David pointed out, at the top of Coastal Bank on Taylor's Pond and bordering the salt marsh, we were able to pull the driveway back further away. We eliminated this circle with the existing invasive miscanthus grasses in the middle of the driveway, and we're able to pull that back. There is an existing eastern red cedar directly in front of the house between the salt marsh and the existing house. That tree will remain. There's a small garden bed on the southwestern side of the house. That garden bed is going to be removed and another cedar tree will be planted in its place. Once the walls are constructed, the entire northwest slope will be completely restored. We are proposing amelanchier at the top of that slope. One of our other concerns with the steepness of that slope and the leaning of some of those pitch pines was that they could potentially be a hazard to the structure in the future. So we are not proposing large canopy-sized trees on that slope, but we are proposing to completely revegetate it with ground cover, grasses, wildflowers, shrubs, and then amelanchier to replace the loss of the pitch pines in that area. On our plan, you can see all the green dots. They correspond with the trees that David's team located. So there's a significant amount of canopy remaining on the site, and that was something that was very important to Mr. Detweiler, is maintaining that canopy and keeping the ground cover intact. In total, we are planting, a significant number of shrubs. We've mentioned the 25 trees, and photographs of the site are also included in our land management plan on page 3 and 4, as well as some images of the rotting retaining wall that's truly a hazard in that area. So we are proposing to plant in total 739 native trees, shrubs, and grasses, including amelanchier, tupelos, eastern red cedar, beech plum, chokeberry, witch hazel, bush honeysuckle, fragrant sumac, groundsel bush, inkberry, low bush blueberry, northern bayberry, summer sweet, sweet gale, sweet fern, switchgrass, Virginia rose, and winterberry holly. So we're really looking to increase and improve the diversity, protect the bordering vegetated wetland and the coastal bank, protect the salt marsh, and keep as much of the existing canopy on this property intact as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, let me start over here, since you guys went last. Karen, you want to kick it off?
One of the things you say is native vegetation damaged by invasive species or historic pruning may be regeneratively pruned using best management practices, et cetera, et cetera. Can you speak to how much native vegetation there is existing now? Because it seems like you're doing an awful lot of work, so I'm not sure where you're thinking the native vegetation will be.
Yeah, there are a couple of trees. So there's the eastern red cedar trees on the southeastern side of the driveway.
Right.
And then there's an existing tree a little bit further to the north. So we just want to ensure that anything that's been, any vines that have encroached, and if we uncover any native vegetation after we remove the mats of invasive vines, we will allow that to remain in place. So we may cut it, prune it, just to allow it to regenerate into a healthy shrub.
Okay. Thank you. And it's not about the mitigation, it's about the actual buildings. The cottage, I understand that you're sort of putting it right where the other one was, but, I mean, this is all within the 50, at least that one could, I think, be moved back or over to not have it quite so much in the 50, to me. I don't know if you've considered that.
We did. It didn't make sense to us in that you're just switching habitat for habitat. There's 50-foot no disturb zone line on the plan, but the wildlife and the ecosystem don't know that. So we're moving from one, same habitat, we're just moving material, moving the house into a virgin area and replanting another area. It didn't make sense to us.
I do think it could be moved, but, okay. Right now, I think that's it for me at this moment.
Thank you. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, the house and the garage, they're bordering a driveway. So, but in any case, the wall on the north end of the cottage, the wall, I looked at the stake and it was really close to a pretty decent pine tree. And it looked like the excavation's gonna destroy the roots of that pine, because it looks like you're doing a nice planting around that pine. It's that hump at the very north end of the cottage. I just happened to notice that. Maybe the wall could be pulled back a hair, because it's gonna excavate the roots of that pine, I think. You know where I'm looking at? The parking area, the very north of the parking area gets small.
On the right side of the parking area?
Well, if you're looking at the garage, it would be the right side, yeah. I'm looking at the map, so. You know where the parking area, the garage, the parking area gets, I mean, the guest house gets very small. Well, there's a big pine on the hill there, and you have the wall angling in towards that pine in the stake, where I saw the end of the wall was really close to that pine tree. And it's gonna excavate the roots of the pine.
It's the very, very, very top of the cottage parking is where he's talking about.
It's not the one in the little.
It's that little extra parking spot across from the garage and cottage.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
You see the
that
wall,
parking
that
spot.
wall that angles. Yeah, that big pine that's in the corner, the wall, if you look at the end of the wall, it's like right on it. Yeah. No, the pine, which pine are you pointing at? No, keep going. Right in the middle, no, right in the middle of the hill is a big pine tree. No, to the hill.
Those are all
Go
proposed
up,
trees.
go
That's
right.
proposed.
Go
Go
right.
right, keep going, keep right
Right
there.
there.
There's a big pine. If you look, there's a wall. The stake is like right on the roots. You might want to consider pulling the wall back a hair.
Yeah, we can angle the.
If you look at the
kicker for
stake again,
driveway
Dave, you'll see what I mean. It's
To get
really
away from
close.
it. Yep, that's not a problem at all.
And again, I don't want to get into this again, but I think you reconsider the size of some of these plants that are going on the mitigation. To maybe increase some of the sizes a little bit wouldn't hurt. And also, I was wondering, what's the protocol? Do you construct the property first and then do the mitigation? Or do you do it all at once?
So we'll start the invasive species management first. And then, like I said, for the portions where we're doing invasive species management, we'll seed those areas, make sure they're stable, blanket any slopes that need to be blanketed with 100% biodegradable erosion control
Before the
blanket.
demolition and everything?
We could even start that before demolition, absolutely. Yes, we often do that. The rest of the restoration planted directly around the cottage and the house will happen after construction, obviously. And then the goal would be to start the invasive species management, get our year of follow-up invasive species management in while the structures are under construction, and then be ready to plant the entire site at the same time.
Because I was just thinking it's gonna be a lot of disturbance to the area, you know, when you're stripping that, ready to redo, you're knocking the house down. Okay.
I think a big part of this for us and for Mr. Detweiler is making sure that the tree protection is also in place, so removing the invasive vegetation from around the cedar trees and then setting up a construction or a perimeter around the trees so that contractors don't inadvertently move in, and protecting that cedar tree that's directly against the house is going to be very challenging but very important, working with the contractor on that.
Thank you.
Just two things. One is, could you mark the trees that are going to be removed?
We can,
Because it was
yes.
hard to, actually, for me to picture which ones were going. The other, actually, and then I just want a clarification. It says here that the cottage is so is the cottage gonna have a patio on the downstairs and then a deck on the upstairs, up on the second floor that overhangs the patio?
It is, so we are proposing, there's the existing brick around the main house. We are proposing to reuse that and create a little bit of a patio area underneath the deck. So the deck is elevated, and then there'll be that dry-laid brick patio underneath that
Yeah,
deck around the
I was just trying to
cottage.
picture where we're coming up into the trees as far as the second floor
There
deck.
is one tree that has to be removed for the construction of that, and we have that marked on our plan, and I'll be sure that we mark that in the
Okay.
field. And we have accounted for that in our tree count.
Okay. And actually, I do have one other question. So down here near where your little culvert is, there's kind of a trail that goes on there? Because somebody's going down where all the boats are on on the bank. So I'm curious if it's just access for the homeowner, or if it's access for other people coming down there and accessing the boats, because that bog is there. So I'm just kind of curious
I
if
don't
that's
know
a
the answer.
trail. And do we need to account for that or accommodate that for your neighbors?
Hello, please identify yourself.
Yeah,
For the record.
Paul Detweiler, the owner.
Thank you.
This site plan doesn't show, my property actually goes far to the east, and it is actually on the other side of the bog.
Oh.
Just beyond that, there is public access to Taylor's Pond, where people keep their boats to the east of my property. What happens is, when the high tides come, the boats wash over to in front of the cranberry bog, and I think people walk over there to retrieve their boats. I think wildlife uses the top of that. I've seen coyotes and stuff there, so I don't use it, I don't need it. It's not needed for access to the town landing where the small boats are kept, that people keep their dinghies to go out to the moorings. But it was there when I bought the property, so that's all I know about it.
Yeah, so the road to the east is Uncle Dean's Road. And that subdivision of Uncle Dean's, we're not part of that. This is a separate parcel that was there before Uncle Dean's was developed, so they have access, yeah.
Okay, that explains that.
Yeah, it's probably a good time of year to have boats having drifted down. People left them. Totally get it.
Questions?
I don't have any additional questions. Actually, Teresa, hats off to you. You've done a 12,000 and 11,000 plan for mitigation today to describe. I have no questions.
Permanent, I'm saying.
Permanent, oh.
Permanent.
Does that mean no? All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just a question for each of you. David, you said the house has been there for 90 years?
I think it's 1934 or?
Okay, anyway,
or
it predates
19
the act, so
Pardon me?
it predates the Wetlands Protection Act.
Yep, a little bit.
We have a little bit. We have, I can't look at it right now because I'm displaying stuff, but we have another 1970s plan to the Conscom. Is that for the cottage?
Crystal brought that to my attention. Whoever did the permitting,
Yes.
Teams crash.
Okay.
Oh. Okay. Yes. Give it a try, see if you can get it to behave. We'll pause here for a moment while it
Sorry.
has a stern talking to Teams. It says, site plan. So proposed addition and proposed retaining wall. So it must have been for this addition to the house here. Yeah, but no, the cottage is not. Okay, we're back. Teams is back, we are back. Sorry about that. Okay, where were we? Oh, no, hang on, Teams is not, you have on the air. Okay, crashed again.
It's been up, sit.
We're on, not quite.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Chatham TV, I got back. But they're frozen.
Did we get a thumbs up? We're back?
You're
All right.
moving.
Okay, we're back. Now, where were we?
One more time.
Yeah, just.
Try again.
I do this with a lot of older properties, just to make sure that we're not licensing things that never perhaps should have been. So the house, I don't care about, the cottage, looks like the OC or whatever it was that we were given is probably for an addition for the main house?
That's what I believe, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so,
Yep.
but for the cottage, we don't know,
That, the assessor's is about 10 years newer than the house.
okay, so
according to-
still
Yes.
way before
Yeah.
WP, okay.
Yeah, and that order of conditions, Crystal notified me about that, and I believe she reviewed it with Paul, but it was not recorded against a proper deed. This is registered land, it wasn't recorded in the land court, so when Mr. Detweiler bought the property, did his due diligence and
Okay.
researched the title, it wasn't there, obviously, so.
Yep.
And you've seen orders and conditions from the 70s and how extensive they are.
Right. Okay, all right, thanks. So Teresa, you may anticipate what I'm going to ask about, and that is the 17 service berries,
Yes.
because you know my feelings about service berries. We have a tree guy here now, plant guy. And I just sometimes balk at replacing trees with service berries, because to me they are large shrubs, small tree, very small trees. So I don't know. What do you think, Eric? Because everyone knows my opinion on it.
Well, it's a clump, so they're gonna naturally be smaller to begin with, but you have, I notice you have Canadian. Is there any alternatives to Canadian?
I mean, the Amelanchier canadensis is the native Amelanchier to this area, so
Because
yes.
I've noticed that on the Canadian, it's smaller sizes are available. I mean, when you get into the autumn brilliance, you can get bigger size.
We can definitely get bigger sizes, and I think that it's certainly appropriate for us to plant something a little bit larger on the site. We are going to be, again, planting it on the slope in the area behind, above the retaining walls. So looking for something that's just allowed to grow into its mature size on
Right,
the
I just,
site.
in my mind, I just don't want to see the flowers higher than the shrubs.
I understand, yes, and I understand. We specifically, and to answer that question, many years ago, we stopped using tall prairie grasses in our seed mix because we found that the tall prairie grasses were outcompeting the shrubs. So we use lower native grasses, mainly little blue stem, autumn bent grass, purple love grass, and other native, warm season native grass species that are not quite as aggressive and won't outcompete the shrubs. But we can certainly increase the size of the Amelanchiers as planted.
Well, I was talking about going in another direction, which is have fewer service berries and more actual trees.
My only concern with planting canopy-sized trees on that slope above the house is that it's a steep slope above the house. We're hoping to eliminate that upper retaining wall. Amelanchier seems like, and we've got a lot of canopy trees directly around it. Amelanchier, an understory tree, does seem like an appropriate sized tree to use in that particular space. We did plant the taller trees along the edge of the bordering vegetated wetland and on the coastal bank along the edge of the salt
Okay,
marsh.
so on the hill, that's where the service berries.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yes.
I understand. Thank you.
That it? Okay, I have a couple of quick questions. So, Taylor's Pond has been identified as impaired by excessive nutrient loading. So did you consider replacing the existing septic system with an AI system to try to?
No, because we're anticipating sewer coming in the next 10 years. They're just finishing up the pump station, which is at the end of this, at the end of the road, basically. So we're hoping Chatham will move quickly on expanding the sewer into South Chatham once that pump station is operational.
Well, fingers crossed on that.
Yeah. Well, South Chatham, Cockle Cove was at the top of the list 20 years ago for getting sewered, and now it's at the bottom of the list for some reason. Because I felt it was, the estuary study felt that Cockle Cove was sufficiently flushed, and it was a good sink for nitrogen. But Taylor's Pond obviously is not. But we did consider it.
Okay. At least it's located as far as you can possibly get, and it replaced a pre-existing cesspool that showed up on that old plan that was much closer, so it's not ideal, but it's better. I'm wondering, David, if you can do a quick walkthrough on the coverage calculations. So the ones on the chart, I'm trying to reconcile them with the numbers on the plan, and if you have the plan there, I can, yeah, you can look at that, and I'll look at the chart. So in the 50, on the chart, you're showing an increase of structures in the 50 of 554 and a decrease of hardscape of 910. That's not, in the 50 here, it shows a decrease of 265 net of everything.
Just give me a second here.
Okay.
So much paperwork. All right. Yeah, my math is wrong. I'm not sure which is right.
Tell you what, we don't need to go through it here, but
Yeah.
if you could have a look at those and adjust whichever one needs to be adjusted, because it was beyond me.
The
That's
other
okay,
one-
we
the
can
other
move,
one, the
yeah,
50
because
to
also
100
there's
looks
an increase of 461 in the outer aura, and the chart says, oh, no, that's 461, that's
yep.
461, okay, it's
Yep.
only the 50, then that's the issue. Is the driveway material changing?
It will be impervious. It'll be either shell or some type of gravel.
Okay,
And there is, I was told by Mr. Detweiler this morning that there's an existing landscape edging along the driveway that's plastic, and that'll all be removed.
Oh,
I
good.
know, we're getting rid of plastic in the NDZ.
okay, well, we're going to have to continue anyway until you file with
Right,
ZBA, so we
So
can do
that was
this.
one of the things. We have not filed with ZBA.
Right.
Pending our first meeting with you. So if the only changes are what was been discussed, we're going to go ahead and file with ZBA.
Yeah, I don't think, I'm not hearing any changes to
and,
the footprint of the floor, anything like
And
that.
we'll get the trees flagged and
Yep.
and get revised materials to you. I don't think we need to come back till after ZBA unless you feel there's something you need to see before you write your comment letter to zoning.
No, I prefer that you go to ZBA and see what they say.
Okay. Jamie, you got an idea when? Sometime in May. So first meeting in June? Yeah, we're not planning on doing any work till after the summer anyways, and
All right,
zoning
let's
board will
see what
most
that
likely
would take us
make that a
to.
condition.
That would be June 5th, yep.
June 5, okay.
I move that we continue 108 Beach Plum Road to the meeting on June 5th, 2024 for a notice of intent.
Gordon, second.
Roll call, Bob?
Aye.
Elise?
Aye.
Mary? Not here. Karen?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
And I vote aye. We'll see you back here
Thank you.
then. Thank you. All right, Paul. If you're hanging in there.
Do we lose him?
bring it-
Yes, I am.
Yes, he is.
Yes, I am.
All right.
Next on the agenda is 34 Scattery Road. 34 Scattery Road Residential Trust, map 16I, parcel 32-2, DEP number SE103669. Proposed project, raise existing dwelling, construct new dwelling, in quotes, outside jurisdiction, with pool, patio, and walls within jurisdiction. Modify existing land management plan. That's the project.
Hello, hello. Who's going first?
Well, I'm just here to say, here's Matt.
Okay.
Matt Elder Southeast.
Matt Lonberger with Wilkinson Ecological Design again. We have altered our plan so that it is now in line with the current interpretation of the regulations. The project is now proposing the removal of 2 trees and offering 6 trees as a 3-to-1 mitigation in the NDZ, and the removal of 5 trees and offering 10 trees as a 2-to-1 mitigation in the outer aura. We believe the previously submitted restoration plan dated February 19th, 2024, and land management plan dated February 19th, 2024, offered significantly more comprehensive approach to the management of non-native and invasive species. In our professional opinion, this approach would have provided a much more impactful native plant community restoration, improved functional capacity of the resource areas to provide wildlife habitat, and increased biological diversity.
And if I may, that's not the updated plan.
What do you mean?
It should be 229.
It
Look on, go to the far right bottom.
Does it look like this? With the 2 here? Yeah.
229, that's it.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to show so he sees.
No, it's not in there. It's a separate document. All the way to the right.
It looks,
I don't believe that was,
There you go.
that wasn't the.
says 229.
Oh, I'm sorry.
229.
Is that the right
That's it.
plan? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was off. Too much like the other one.
All right.
Well, it does look very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have as many exits.
Yeah.
So,
So questions, go.
well, comment.
Yep.
The only point I was trying to make before, I guess I'm sort of the instigator of your changed plan, was that the tree replacement just simply didn't match the regs. I never said, though, and I still don't think, that there wasn't room to bargain.
That was not indicated to us at the time,
No,
so we left.
I said it out loud, where I said, be willing to talk about trading trees for shrub biomass. So just to be sure you understand, at least from my perspective, it's not like I was slavishly sticking with the regulation and the mitigation ratio. It's just that we needed to get it right in terms of what wasn't compliant and then go from there. So I was never suggesting, personally, that we require that ratio or nothing.
Okay, that was not the impression that our client was left with,
Okay.
and so he requested that this be settled at the next meeting.
All right.
Since it has already been, this will be our 3rd continuation.
Yeah, anyway, that's where I am on this. You can take that as you wish.
I have one question on the plan, the land management plan. I see 9 trees are marked for removal. And you say 7 trees in your letter.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a discrepancy. I don't know what to say. I mean, which 2 are not being removed that, because it says in yours, in the land management, you have 9 trees marked. And I'm just
see.
curious which are not being removed that are marked as removed, because you say 7.
Yeah, I believe that the land management plan may be showing an older version of that, though it's what's on our actual restoration plan is what should
Well,
be.
it's the land management plan from March 6th. So I think it's the most recent.
All I can say is that that must be a mistake then.
Okay, but I just. if
Could
we
it, could
just
it be
fix
the 2 dead fruit trees?
Yeah.
It's
maybe.
certainly possible.
That's
Yeah.
what I would, that's what,
In which case, all I want is that you just remove the word remove, so that it's accurate. I mean, obviously, they're dead, or you could say, since, you know, a little note, since they're dead, that's why they're being removed. You know, something, just so we have that understanding.
is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Eric?
Well, you know, again, these oak trees, size 10, what does that mean, 10 gallon? Is that 10 gallon oak trees?
I'm not sure what the size and what that would come to off the top of my head.
But that number 10 means 10 gallon, right, for the oak tree?
Again, I'd have to check with my designer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, if that's a number 10, usually means 10 gallon.
That would be my assumption.
Yeah, in my opinion, I mean, you might accidentally mow it with a mower or stumble over it.
There won't be any mowing going on.
I know, but that's awful. And then you've got your 50 native shrubs, size 1 to 3. I mean, that's a huge variance from one.
All of our sizes are consistent with normal mitigation procedures in the state, and the larger you get, the longer it takes to establish, the more water it needs, the more likely it is to need additional nutrient resources.
Okay.
So we follow exactly what's recommended by the state.
Thanks.
Cheryl, anything? Okay. I have a quick question about, so in looking at the trees that are slated for removal, marking them, you have, in the no disturb, you have the leaning spruce, the damaged pitch pine, 1 good health English oak. So why is that doomed?
It's in our management area, and we are providing the adequate mitigation that your commission requires, so I'm not sure that that's entirely.
Well, the tree removal has to, there are specific standards in our regulations for when trees can be removed, so I'm just getting to.
It's in the area we're trying to restore.
And what about in the outer aura? There's another good health English oak and a good health dogwood that are slated for removal.
Dogwood, I believe, is required to be removed for a structure.
Okay, there, I see
Yes.
it, there it is, yep.
Yeah, and the other one's in the restoration area.
Okay. But the other English oaks that are being left are not in the restoration area?
We've specifically changed the location of the shrub restoration area we're doing to leave those oaks as requested.
So the restoration area is to the northeast of the area that's being restored for, in response to the prior violation in the area? Is that, so that area just to the northeast of that lighter shading, is that, because that's where all of these are? Or most.
I suppose that if we were going to go over every detail of the design, I'd have to actually have the designer come in here and discuss.
Well, it's not every detail, I'm just asking about, there's 4 trees slated for removal.
Yes.
2 of them are good health English oaks, I'm just asking why.
We're going to be replacing them with native trees.
Well, you're going to be replacing them with much smaller native trees that.
So you're replacing them with a 10-gallon pot tree?
They're being replaced at the mitigation ratios required by your regulations.
Oh, those are regulations?
The
Yeah.
ratios are our regulations.
Ratios are our regulations.
So there's 14 native trees going in with the,
Depending on the size.
It did actually work out. 7 trees, 2 in the NDZ, 5 in the outer aura yielded the 14, and that was correct, or 16, 6 plus 10. Okay, I'm just still trying to understand why they are coming out. All right, go ahead. Do you have?
Well, I guess I can answer for you. It's because they're not native trees, right? That's why you want to take them out.
We would like to take them out because we're trying to, as much as possible, restore a native plant community, as I've said.
Okay. Lee, do you have anything else? No?
I just want to reiterate, since there was an apparent misunderstanding, do you want to go away and rethink this, or do you want to stick with what you have?
Our client has asked that this be the last of these, if
Okay,
possible.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, is there anything else? Then I think we're ready to schedule this for an order. And that date would be the 27th.
I move that we schedule 34 Scattery Road for an order of conditions on March 27th, 2024.
Gordon, second.
Roll call, Bob.
Aye.
Elise.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Cheryl.
Aye.
And I say aye. See you on the 27th.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. All right, Paul, let's move on. Thad's still here, so.
Okay, last one, 127 Christopher Harding Lane, Rolfe Nixon, map 12D, parcel 3L6, SE10 3661, redevelopment of the site.
All right. Thank you. We last heard this on the 28th. We asked you to submit a revised narrative that matched the new project as you are proposing it, and revise your coverage calculations. I'm just trying to pull it up. We did receive all of that. I want to see if anybody has any questions, concerns, issues of going into the preparation of an order of conditions. No,
I'm
no,
good.
no, nope, sorry, okay, well, thank you for submitting, oh, hold on, I hear a hold on.
busy doing AV stuff now.
Okay,
Oh, and the microphone.
Oh, and the microphone.
I heard the rumble.
Yep.
Hold on. Yeah, I think I'm, okay.
Yeah, the only impact we end up with is the 140 feet for the equipment,
For the
right?
equipment that has to be where it is, and by the way, for the record, Thad Aldridge.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
So the equipment, the generator and the AC unit need to meet the setback.
Right,
And the only place that we can put them close to the house is where we've proposed them, without putting them into the resource area, which we're trying to avoid.
yep,
And then putting them further north on the lot would cause difficulty.
right. So I take it with this, all these revisions, you do not need to go back to ZBA, or do you?
No, no, this
Yeah?
is
Oh,
complete bypass, so the house is being renovated. It is not a substantial alteration, it's keeping less than 50% of the value of the house, and it's not changing. So now it will, it's just a refresh of the
Yeah.
house.
Gratified, though, that the most of the mitigation and restoration plan survived. So the house is not going to be FEMA compliant, it's,
Correct.
and are they using that, okay. So
It's
just,
not required to meet FEMA compliance. when
yeah, because you
keep it
haven't
under
exceeded the 50%, so, okay. Good luck.
Just, yeah, one procedural question. I zoomed in on the planning notes there.
Okay.
Are those right? Because I thought that we had, the 1218 note says we're planting 12 trees, whereas the 1215 note says we're planting,
I think the 215 is supposed to be 24.
right,
I can fix that one.
right.
there was a reduction in everything, so it's, I have Teresa.
Yes, but I apologize, Teresa Sprague, Blue Flex Design. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Just are the planning notes correct with regard to the dates and the amount of trees?
We're removing 4 Norway maples and replacing with 3 red maples and 5 eastern red cedars. That's correct. The 215 date, on the revision box, I'm not sure of the revised date on the plan is the accurate revised date.
Yeah, there's some dates that are wrong, at least one place, maybe 2 places on this, so.
I will double check that and make sure that that date's corrected and all the dates match on the plan, but the number of trees being removed, the 4 Norway maples, and then the replacement with the 3 maples and the 5 eastern red cedars is correct.
Just the date is wrong.
It sounds like it. I guess you're saying there's a discrepancy between the date in the box.
Well,
and date
the
on
latest date, there's an earlier date and a later date, so.
Could you
Could- yeah,
pan
if
to
you
the
could
right?
pan
and
to
what's
the-
Pan to the right,
Because
okay.
there's a date box over there.
Okay, so that's accurate. Revised 215. The original plan
We'll
was
get the year
submitted.
right.
Oh, I see. The year is wrong.
Right.
We will
Oh.
correct that. It says
Okay.
2023, and it should say
Oh.
24. My
Right.
apologies.
Just to be picky. that's all.
Yes,
All right.
nope, absolutely. I will make sure that that's correct and it says 24. We want to be in the right year, for
That's
sure.
good.
Okay, that's it.
Back in the day when we used to write checks,
Oh
between
my
January and
gosh.
February, it would take me 2 months to get the right year.
Yes, sorry about that.
That's okay. All right, so we can schedule this for order on the 27th.
Very good.
I move that we continue 127 Christopher Harding Lane to the meeting on March 27th, 2024 for an order of conditions.
Gordon, second.
Roll call, Bob.
Aye.
Elise.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Cheryl.
Aye.
And I vote aye. We'll see you back here on the 27th. Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
Okay, next one.
All right, Paul, this is an open and continue.
Okay, Madam Chair, the last item on the agenda before we do the presentation of the Friends of Trees is 21 Shattuck Lane, Clay A. Rosenberg and Andrea Lynn Flink, map 15C, parcel 12-6, SE10 3671, proposed house addition, pool replacement, hardscape, and associated site improvements. The applicant has requested a continuance to March 27, 2024.
I move that we continue 21 Shattuck Lane to the meeting on March 27th, 2024 for a notice of intent.
Gordon, second.
Roll call, Bob.
Aye.
Elise.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Cheryl.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Okay. All right.
Next on the agenda is the presentation from Dee Dee, Friends of Trees, Tree Protection Bylaw.
Good afternoon, or is it good evening already?
Oh, come on.
Okay.
Not yet.
Dee Dee, may I ask you a question?
Yeah?
I have to leave at about 4:20. What is less rude? Leaving now or leaving in the middle of your presentation?
She's not going to need 20 minutes.
Yeah, my
Really?
presentation is going to take like 4.5 minutes.
Right.
Erase that, erase that.
So, well, good afternoon again, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm here representing Friends of Trees to propose to you a tree protection bylaw. We hope for your vote of support. We've already been to the Planning Board, the Select Board, Park and Rec, and they've all voted to their support. First, let me begin by telling you what this bylaw does not do. The tree protection bylaw does not apply to trees growing on private property. What it does do is offer greater protection to trees growing on town-owned public land. More than 100 years ago, Massachusetts passed Mass General Law, Chapter 87, known as the Shade Tree Law. The law is intended to protect shade trees, basically street trees, in the communities across the Cape. At this point, it's antiquated. It is also vague and addresses only shade tree removal. It is virtually silent about replacing trees lost. The purpose of this tree protection bylaw is to clarify, amplify, and fill in the gaps in Chapter 87. It provides the tree warden with clear guidance with respect to process and gives the tree warden, who already has extensive powers granted by 87, the explicit authority to require tree replacement. It also extends certain protection to town-owned trees in developed spaces such as parks and to encourage preservation of town woodlands. Again, the tree bylaw does not apply to trees growing on private property. Does the bylaw affect the Conservation Commission? It does, in two minor ways. In Section 7-3, it establishes the following process, which I'll read so I don't screw it up. When a public shade tree is to be removed on conservation lands managed by or resources under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, the public hearing required under the provisions of this bylaw shall be consolidated into a single public hearing before the tree warden and the Conservation Commission. This same provision also applies to the Planning Board. The point is, a joint hearing ensures a consistent directive to the applicant. The second impact is less direct. It concerns town-owned woodlands under the control of the Conservation Commission. I'll give you more about that in a minute. There are four other provisions of the bylaw to note. First, it establishes a revolving tree fund, the purpose of which is to receive fines for violations and other payments required under Chapter 87, as well as any other monies the town may appropriate to it. Such funds will be used for the replacement and care of Chatham's trees. Second, as I stated earlier, 87 does not address required replacement of removed trees. This leaves it up to the tree warden and so allows for appearance of being arbitrary and inconsistent. The bylaw specifies how and what is expected for replacing requirements. 3, the bylaw extends some protections to trees on town-owned, developed public spaces such as parks. If the town wants to remove a tree in a park, they must notify the tree warden. The tree warden will then require and advise on the replacement of the species and location. Likewise, if a tree comes down in a storm or succumbs to disease, the tree warden requires that the town replace it. Without such requirements to replant trees, Chatham may permanently lose trees along our streets and in our parks. An example of this is in my neighborhood. On Homestead Lane, 3 different very large maples came down in 3 different storms. This Homestead Lane, unfortunately, is now barren of shade trees, and they have not yet been replaced. Under this bylaw, they would be required to replace those trees. The final provision is that I referred to earlier is where we have a common interest, the Conservation Commission and this bylaw. The bylaw encourages the town to protect woodland trees and to preserve as much woodland space as possible during infrastructure development, such as wastewater treatment plants and pump stations. It accomplishes this by requiring the site plan to include areas of woodland to be disturbed and the number of large trees that will be taken. It encourages contractors to minimize disturbance and to include in the contract a replanting plan, the goal of which is to rewild as much as possible the disturbed areas. Without this provision, we will continue to lose our forested lands bit by bit, and wildlife habitat will unnecessarily be segmented or destroyed. Fortunately, the town has been sensitive to this. But the bylaw will make that explicit. An example of the Conservation Commission exercising their powers was the wastewater treatment plant that was constructed on Middle Road. The Conservation Commission required mitigation. Sadly, it was unsuccessful. Anyway, if the property wasn't under your jurisdiction, I don't know what the Select Board might have required in terms of mitigation, if anything. In conclusion, because I told you it'd only be a few minutes. You're awesome. When we do as much as we can to preserve and protect Chatham's trees along our streets, in our parks and woodlands, we all benefit from their many values. And we will preserve this wonderful, invaluable resource to future generations. And not to be forgotten, we will preserve the habitat that our wild neighbors need for their very existence. I'd be happy to take your questions.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Quick question. From a town road, from the center line, how much does the town own?
It's in Chatham, under Dan Tobin, he's always, which 30 years he was tree warden, he's always included about 6 feet from the edge of the street inward. It's basically where the utility poles are. If a property owner were to object to that, then they could have it surveyed. But typically, it's that 6-foot area.
Thanks.
In the appendix section, the replacement ratios, is that part of the bylaw, actually? Is that part of what's going to be voted on?
It is.
And have you gotten any response to that?
No.
Oh, okay. It's not consistent with what our current regulations are, so we need to be doing another round of updating of our regulations. So if this is going to the bylaw, we will align ours, which is better. I mean, these are a bit smaller, which is good. The ratios kick in with smaller DBH, so that's good. So we'll get ours aligned.
That'd be great. We got this from, when we developed this, we looked at the bylaws in Orleans has one, Provincetown has one, there's a number of them off Cape. Wellfleet and Harwich are both talking about a tree protection bylaw. And so we looked at what those ratios were. And this we felt was reasonable. Like Provincetown they do it on biomass.
Well,
So,
that's
I
an
know.
interesting, I would love to hear more about that, because that's a much more accurate gauge of the ecosystem value of any particular tree.
But you come out with huge replacement, yeah.
And in Provincetown, that's probably pretty tricky, because it's so built out.
Yeah.
Okay. I had another question, and now I'm blanking on it. Oh, I know. So if what we spent our time on today were happening after this was proposed and passed, the tree warden would have been required to hold a hearing on the tree removal on airport ground, because that's town-owned, correct?
No, they would not, under this bylaw, it would not normally kick that in. The select board, though, could require it.
So the hearing is only required for shade trees in the public right-of-way,
Right.
but not on other town-owned lands?
No.
Too bad.
I know. Again, we consulted with the temporary now tree warden about this.
Yeah, and I take it that this is an iterative process. This
It is.
town would not accept a lot of over-regulation, particularly
Exactly,
on
yeah.
private property, but you begin, and then as people begin to support it more, you can expand it.
Yeah, the tree warden under Mass General Law has a lot of powers given to his discretion, his or her discretion.
Mm-hmm. But the area that they have jurisdiction over is quite small. It's just the right-of-way.
Well, except for if they want to remove a tree in a park, the town needs to defer to the tree warden regarding what to replace and where.
Okay.
So a tree coming down in a park wouldn't necessarily require a public hearing.
It would not.
And that was also, I guess, a deliberate decision to make it that way.
Again, it was to, I guess, not to appear to be overreaching.
Okay.
So the three sycamore maples up on Old Harbor, Old Wharf, that a hearing was held on, that's because they are within that 6 foot, so they're in the right-of-way?
Correct.
Whatever happened with that? Was that permission given?
It was one of the issues that was in favor of removing the trees was that they were invasive trees.
Right.
And the property owner was willing to mitigate by putting in, I think it was 50 American hollies and some other native evergreens.
Okay. Not in a big, long line, though, so it forms a
Well,
hedge.
some of them were, yes. It was also, it was obviously to the benefit of the property owner that this would be a hedge.
Yeah.
But they did, after we talked to them about, at the meeting, they offset them, and then they added, and they integrated into the hedge some other species of native plants, native trees.
That's good. You did well there.
Well-
We approved the removal of a sycamore maple on that property.
Yes, I looked at that.
Yeah, after we tried pushing back about why it was considered invasive and we were convinced when they showed us all the photographs of hundreds of little suckers coming up. And we
These
said,
trees
"Okay."
also had a fungus. Craig Schneeberger was there representing the property owner, and they did have a fungus that there is no apparent cure for. And a matter of fact, the fungus gets into the soil, and the property owner has to now remove not just the trees, but all the soil where the trees are
Wow.
growing because it's infected with the fungus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a big project for the property owner.
Okay. No, and a net benefit for the environment there.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you could give us your approval, that would be great. We go to FinCom tomorrow, so. If you, I shouldn't say approval, your support.
Yes,
For,
we can't
for
be
the-
on record.
Yes, no, just your support for the. Yeah.
All right, we'll do, so motion to
Thank you.
approve the,
Support.
that support. Support, God almighty.
Do you want a letter, or what do you want?
No, I think just having your vote. I mean, if you would send a letter to the.
You want to
to the-
write a letter? God.
Not
I'm
me.
volunteering.
That would be great. We are going, the select board did put us on the warrant and voted their recommendation for.
Did you get
approving-
unanimous recommendation from them?
Pardon?
Did you get unanimous recommendation from the select board?
Select board, yes.
Oh, good job.
Good.
That's very
Yeah.
good.
And
All
so
right.
we have FinCom tomorrow, so that's the
Good.
last of the.
And planning board as well?
Planning board approved.
Wow, great, excellent. Okay,
Thank you.
So I move that we support the warrant article for the shade tree. Is that what it would be called?
tree protection
Tri-
bylaw.
Tree protection bylaw, yeah.
Gordon, second.
Okay, Bob, Elise.
Aye.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Cheryl.
Aye.
I vote aye, you got unanimous from us.
I
Thank
move
you very
that we
much.
adjourn.
Oh, second, Gordon, second.
Wait a minute,
Aye.
whoa,
What?
time out.
Hold on.
Oh, hold on.
Time out, yeah, sorry.
No, we're good, you're
real-
good.
real-
Paul needs us to stay.
Yeah, sorry, I mentioned at the end of the
Yeah,
agenda.
right.
Look, I'm just dovetailing the airport thing, for the gentleman who got up and spoke about process and procedure with
Yep.
the commission, and I just wanted to inform the commission that, as you know, 97 Tilapy, we had to wait for the commission to issue their their modification permit before we could issue the emergency certification.
Right.
The difference in this case is it's a town project, and under the Cape Cod Commission regulations, you proceed with town projects. So you will continue with your process, and the Cape Cod Commission will continue with theirs, but you don't have to suspend anything, and we don't have to wait for them to make a decision on the major modification. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, it sounds to me like the change to major modification is gonna result in a longer process, because now they have to hold
Yes.
hearings and all of that, so we
Okay.
shall see. All right, thank you for that
Yes.
update. That's interesting, because it's a
Yep.
town, okay. That was the same reason that we couldn't do a mandatory referral for vegetation.
Right.
Because it's a town project.
Right.
All right, now we can.
I move that we adjourn.
Gordon, second.
Bob,
Aye.
Elise,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
Cheryl.
Aye.
I vote aye. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Aye.
Aye.